You're listening to Well, I Laughed, Part 1 of Famous Feuds, Party Animal. Good evening, and welcome to the live siege of Maia and Casey's home. I pull up to your house, and right before I can get out, there are two door-to-door salesmen already on the way up. And it's watching the Titanic hit the iceberg from a second ship.
Yeah.
It's icebergs on a ship.
Yeah. From a third ship. That took me a second.
So we're reporting to you live. They know where we are.
Yeah, they do.
I think we're going to be okay. I think we've seen the other side of it.
I'm so tired, y'all. I'm way too tired to come up with a nice way to say no.
Yeah. And
I don't think he was quite prepared for how, deadpan I was.
Right.
Because he just kept being like, okay, well, and I was like, I'm not interested. And he was like, well, are you worried about the money? And I was like, I mean, of a lot of things, but yeah. And he was like, well, we wouldn't pay. It's the people who sell you solar because they're like, you're spending so much on electricity. And it's like, yes, I'm aware. And also, we don't have the money to be doing that shit right now. And I know you say it's going to be free, but I also know that, no, it's not. I'm an engineer.
Right. Well, even I will save money in the long run. I'm not saving money on that right now. I don't
which is
have
when I
$5
need
to $10,000 for the installation, and the tax cuts are changing on all of that kind of stuff, which really helps spur the growth. So, yeah, he did not like hearing no from anyone, especially a woman. And so after 90 seconds, I grabbed my bag and just walked up, and you were like, "I have a date," and I took my hand up a little bit, and as soon as you said date, I manually.
And I was like, well, I have
it.
something I need to be doing.
And then I got to the top of the stairs, and I was prepared to grab your elbow and be like, everything okay, sweetheart? But then I see Casey lingering in the shadows behind you. And I go, we're doing a lot right now as a collective.
I wouldn't have answered the door if they hadn't seen me through the front window. He doesn't listen to the podcast anymore. Tyler came over a couple days ago to drop off the chair and then a charger he had borrowed. And I was just so not in the mood to talk to anyone at all that I was in the front room and I saw his car pull up from a little ways away and I ducked and ran.
On the ground scrambling.
Yeah. And because I had texted him repeatedly, you can just leave it. You know the code. You could just leave it inside or you could put it in the thing. Or,
please, sir, take what you want. Just don't talk to
please.
us.
And Casey took pity on him and went and said hi. But I was like, I can't right now.
He was in a chatty mood on Monday. I got home from a basically 6-hour car ride home from Utah, where I stopped twice on that ride, which is very unusual for me, but I was kind of stiff and stuff.
Right.
And I got home, and Tyler, who was working from my home that day, came bounding down the stairs, and he's an adult man, and that's established. Yeah. The energy of a small dog.
Yes. And him and Mo get along really well.
Right. But it had been kind of an early-ish morning, and I had done a little work from the hotel room, and then had grabbed coffee, and then had just kind of driven the entire way. I was just kind of ready to have it all behind me, and he's like, and do you want to get dinner? And I'm like, no. But I couldn't say that to a small dog excited to see you home.
Get dinner?
So I look at him and I go, okay, it's 3:30. I know you still have work to do, and I need a nap. And also, 3:30 is crazy early for dinner.
Yeah.
So I'm going to nap, you're going to work, and when I wake up, we'll talk about dinner. Okay? Woke up feeling rested, but exactly the same way spiritually.
Yeah. Yes.
And I walk into my office where he was working, and I go, tonight is the last free evening I have until the day after your birthday on the 21st. And that Tyler hearing that was basically Tyler's brain hearing, I'm going to prison. Because that's something Tyler would never do.
No, yeah.
And so I look at him and I go, so I'm not going to get dinner with you. And I'm sorry. But I do need groceries. So we can go grocery shopping together and we can chat it up. And then you're going to head out. And this is at 5. And he finally left my place at 7:15. And that was good. That was really, really good. But yeah, he had a lot of energy on Monday.
Yeah. Casey had a log meeting on Monday that lasted essentially all day. So after work, we both went over to the beer garden and got a couple beers. And I was texting Tyler because I was like, I need that charger back tonight. I don't trust you to keep it overnight. And so just swing by and drop it off. You can leave it in the package locker. You know the code. Casey and I aren't going to be home for a while. And then he responded like, okay, Grant and I got to chatting. Let me know when y'all are on your way back. And I was like,
no.
I was like, read the above, please. And then I was like checking his location because I was hoping that he would drop it off while we were still out. And then I saw you guys coming back from groceries. And I was like, okay.
No,
so he took the no rush thing real seriously.
I also took the no rush thing very seriously. We got once, I mean, you know, with all of us, once we get talking, we're talking. I
wasn't pressed about it. All I knew was that Tyler would want to talk when he got here, and I did not want to talk. So.
Other things that I want to let you guys know right away. Here it is. Okay, I have two kind of huge culture things for you. Okay, if you trust my opinion at all about anything, now is the moment. Okay?
He really took that one Chapel Roan win, and
I'm about to put you on to your next Chapel Roan win. Here's the thing.
Does Chapel know about that?
I don't know. I'm kind of afraid if she does. No, the musical artist CMAT. CMAT. She has a couple of songs and like albums that are already out. Like she is a somewhat established artist. I just think she's an under the radar artist. And she has her latest album coming out right now. And the album, I believe, is titled Take a Sexy Picture of Me. And it has 2 songs right now. The title song of the entire album, Take a Sexy Picture of Me. And then her second song came out is Running/Planning. Both of them are wonderful. I love playing them as I'm like cleaning or getting things ready in the kitchen. They are just absolute bops. If you're looking for a summer listen, if you continue to carry the high in your own life of being the first person in your circle that knew about Chapel Roan, start playing them CMAT. I'm telling you, something's happening with her. Second, and this is now a book recommendation, 10 Toes Down. I'm coming. That's what the young people say these days, by the way.
I hate it.
10 Toes Down. I like to like firmly planted, but I'm imagining your feet are actually up a little bit and like the 10 toes are going down, like bird perching kind of energy. Oh, birds where the line gets crossed.
Yes.
10 Toes Down. My latest little queer book that I read was so good. Titled The Hymn to Dionysus by Natasha Pulley.
You're going to need to spell some of those words.
HYMN.
Okay.
The Hymn of, and then DIONYSUS. Dionysus.
Okay.
Not necessarily the traditional way. I think Dionysus is spelled across like all spellings and stuff.
Yeah.
Here's why you're going to love it. Okay. First, if you are a fan of like Song of Achilles kind of stuff like that, it has stuff like that. Not as romantic as Song of Achilles is, which is truly like a love story, but it's queer. If you love Greek mythology, you're gonna love The Hymn to Dionysus. If you love just kind of like a big complex story, and when I say a big complex story, I don't mean like you need a sheet of paper and you're writing down like characters and like locations and there's like clues that you're supposed to be collecting, things like that. I don't mean complicated in that sense. I just mean like the story's big. The author does such a good job of walking you through all of it. You, for the most part, live entirely in the point of view of one character, the main character, Phaedros. And that's really interesting. You get to really know some of these characters really well. It felt like at times in the book, I knew what the main character's next choice was going to be before it even happened, or like he would make decisions that didn't surprise me. Not because like the book was repetitive or the character was one-dimensional, but I felt like I really had come to understand who this character was and like what he prioritized. So just like in terms of like a book, it's really well written, it's queer, it's interesting. The other 2 things I'll say about it is it's like also at times like kind of like violent, like, and I don't mean like violent for the sake of violence, but if you really liked Game of Thrones season 1, where literally in any chapter kind of anything could happen, anyone could die, anything could happen, like a development, like it didn't feel like everything was like plotted out and there was like sacred elements that like couldn't be touched, or like these characters needed to exist to the end to tell the story. Like legitimately there'd be times that I'd be like, shit, who's about to die? Like I don't know what's going on there. And finally, the thing that I really thought was interesting too, and I haven't read a lot of like fiction based on Greek mythology or in that world, so I don't know if this is a theme across this genre specifically or not, but something that I think was really interesting about this and what felt grounded in like Greek mythology was, I mean, it's called The Hymn to Dionysus. Dionysus is a god in like Greek mythology, right? a really interesting perspective of like, what happened if these gods came down to earth and were like part of us, but not like that song, what if God was one of us, was a stranger on the bus. Do you know what song I'm talking about?
I'm going to not lie to you. I was actually desperately trying to think of the name of a book that I'm going to reference in like 2 seconds.
Okay. If not, you did not have the kind of Lutheran upbringing I had. But like, no, I don't mean it in that sense of like, and then everyone's a believer at the end and it's really a lesson about like, you know, leave your wicked ways and turn towards the sun. No, I just mean like, what happens if one of the main and or supporting characters is a god, but not like an all-powerful, all-seeing, all-predictable, everything's within his control kind of god.
Not omniscient.
But like, hey, I can kind of predict some stuff and I can kind of like do some stuff, but you all have free agency even when I actively tell you not to do things. And then like we all have to respond. It's not like I tell you not to do something, you do it anyways, and then I have like the perfect solution laid out. Like just really interesting in that regard, right? Like
Dear listener, Grant clearly never read Percy Jackson.
yeah, correct.
That's like, what if the gods came down to earth, caused a whole fucking scene, had a bunch of kids, and now those kids are in summer camp? Go.
And I think that's really interesting too. But what's so interesting about the hymn to Dionysus, there is officially one god in this entire story.
It's literally just Dionysus.
Is the only god in the story. And by the way, that's not the POV of the entire book. And so that's
a chaotic world they're living in.
But there's a couple other times too where you're like, wait, was that magic, or is that just something that like the priests and the witches, who are just doctors, by the way. I think the author did a really good job too of like picking words that we already have a lot of connotations around and then actively using them in like totally different settings. Yeah. And that was really interesting. Like witches, as we understand it, would be their priests, and like doctors are their witches. And I'm sorry, that makes it sound like almost like childish or predictable or like YA genre level. No, not a YA book at all. Like,
witches can often be in a lot of folklore healers.
Yeah. And they do a great job too. And sometimes books are so quick to try to build a world that it happens inorganically. They're like, and that's when on the 7th day we have the feasting festival because we blah, 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 right? And it's like very much like
info dumping,
I'm reading an anthropology report on a culture that doesn't actually exist.
It's info dumping.
Right. But like this, it just happens so like naturally. And when the character is curious about something, you are also curious about something.
Because it's been brought up enough.
Yeah. It's going to be a book whose world I stay in, at least in my mind, for the next couple weeks. Like it's wonderful. And now I'm going to say this is a content warning plus, let's go ahead and say 60 seconds plus 60 seconds now for some light spoilers about this book. If you're a person who only reads things that they feel they know what's going to happen because you have anxiety, feel free to listen. So plus 60 seconds now. Maia, what's my favorite / least favorite trope in
They deserved more time.
They deserved more time. And this book somehow manages to give you both sides of that coin. They didn't even know it was possible, but it's so beautiful and
devastating.
Devastating, but also beautiful. The book I read like a year ago, just devastating.
That one actually was devastating.
Ripped me in half.
Yeah.
This one, no. I ended the book just so happy and content. The only sadness, it's okay if you're back now. I'm done talking about spoilers. The only sad emotion I had afterwards is that the book was done and that it's not part of a series. And it's like not set up to like where it could be part of a series.
Yeah,
like
it's
the
done.
whole story was told. And that means we have to leave these like characters behind and the setting behind. I do too, but it was so good. I have been listening to it as an audiobook on Spotify Premium. You were right.
Yeah,
and I didn't believe you. There's
a
limit. I have upped that limit twice since then, so I could keep listening to it. It's like a 16-hour listen, and I had, turns out, like an hour left on my account. Good news, those hours roll over. So
That's
it's just
good.
an investment into my future. I love the book so much that even though I listen to it on the audiobook format, I am probably going to buy a physical copy of the book to like support the author, have a copy of it when I want. And also the cover is like gorgeous. So
I love it.
Okay, you say some words now. I just needed to share that with everybody I know.
Apparently.
And I finished the book an hour ago. I knew I'd be finishing the book, and so I
right.
kind of started to put some thoughts together. But you are at the vanguard of listening to me talk about this for the next 2-3 weeks,
That's fine.
Just so you know.
As long as you're okay with me getting a little glazed over the next time you say it.
100%.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'll nod at all the right points.
Yep.
I'll laugh at all the right moments.
Cue
Don't
me
you
in on some of
worry.
the details if I forget them.
Yeah.
Okay. There were 5 reasons why I love the book. Now. No, I'm kidding. Could you imagine? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I could imagine,
Yeah,
actually.
absolutely. I am that kind of way sometimes. Anyways, what's life like? What's life like for M Dog over there?
Ew.
I know. I'm sorry. I hated it when I said it
Yeah,
too.
Jesus. Well, if you're following along with the whole chair debacle, because I certainly am.
And I am too.
Yeah.
I guess.
Grant and Jacob have been unwittingly subscribed to the updates.
Big fan of it, but it's always so funny when the text message comes across. Because in our big lives and in my big brain and the worlds and circles and the things I got to get done every day, I'm just never expecting a chair update. Especially now that it's like done raining. I'm never expecting a chair update.
Yeah.
And then boom.
I was able to access the chair today without putting on muck boots or anything like that. I didn't even get my boots really that muddy. It was a great day. I told my boss about it. He was thrilled for me, unironically, I think. It was a good day. I do have some things.
Amazing.
You wanna have your like thought process ruined for the rest of the day?
I doubt that's going to happen, but challenge me.
It's not going to happen. I don't know why I said it like
Okay.
that.
Sorry, that seemed really bold. And I'm trying to channel. Children say things to me all the time. My thought process is hard to derail.
Do you want to have one specific version or one specific aspect of mythology ruined for you for the foreseeable future?
Sure.
Okay. Centaurs have 6 legs and thus are insects.
Oh, that's fun.
And
like
then
that.
what nipples do they use?
Boy centaur, girl centaur.
I'm assuming girl centaur.
Girl centaurs, they're definitely using their under
boobs?
Their under udders. Unshakable.
I just hate the fact that they're insects. That's really what bugs me.
I'm going to hit you with the question one of my students loves to ask at my desk, even though she knows it makes me uncomfortable. Would you rather have teeth for hair or hair for teeth?
Yeah, you don't like anything to do with teeth.
I don't like anything that has to do with like body changing, like body altercation, stuff like that in these stories.
Hates puberty.
Do not like that. Okay, I don't think hair for teeth is puberty, for the record.
In cultural news, Liza has outlived the Kia Soul.
And the Trump-Musk relationship.
This version, anyway.
Yeah, it's so true.
He deleted the tweet about the Epstein files.
Good. No one has it screenshotted.
Yeah.
That's good.
And so, someone did the meme that was like, yeah, because no one saw it. Hey, listener, if you're not in the U.S. or you're not in...
Good for you.
Yeah, or not invested in politics, so you don't know what we're talking about. Trump and Elon Musk were buddy-buddy for a while, Trump being the president and Elon Musk being the rich billionaire who single-handedly funded his entire campaign and the campaign of many other Republicans. And he also owns a space company and claims he invented Tesla when he actually did not. Look it up. They had a breakup, and it was very public. It was the gayest thing about Pride Month.
So gay.
So gay. It was so
gay so
public, and they
far.
were like, well, I think he's inefficient, and I think you should get all your contracts cut. Yeah, well, you're a pedophile.
Right. And it's like, Elon, maybe don't yell that accusation.
Yeah.
Like, you're not wrong. Obviously, you're not wrong, but you are one as well.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just don't know any super wealthy conservative man with a weird body like his that also has a healthy relationship with like boundaries or the age of consent.
No.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. Yeah, and he tweeted that Trump is part of the Epstein files, which we be knowing. But yeah.
I love it. I had a wedding to go to this last weekend. I was talking about it because it was pre on the last episodes. We're in the post stage now. Here's the thing.
You liked it.
I love weddings. I love weddings, which I think is kind of a surprise for my temperament and personality.
No, absolutely. You just ranted to us about a romantic gay book for about 10 minutes. You're going to sit here and have the audacity to tell me that you don't love love?
I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to really sit with what you just said. No, I love weddings. I know we kind of joked on the last episode, like, invite us to your wedding. Invite us to your wedding. We would have a great
Forgot
time.
that we did that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't. I'm increasingly like, I want it. I had a friend in, obviously up there, bride and groom were both friends of mine. And then best man was Danny of Podcast Cinema Universe. And then one of the bridesmaids was Betsy, one of the speech coaches. And I've shouted her out before. And it's just like, it was one of those moments where it's like so cool to one, like see your friends up there and be like we're adults and like this is what we're doing. We're here to support each other. And then to like see two people get married. And it's like, for how awful things oftentimes are, to like watch two people like choose to like stand next to each other, and like, you know, it's like one of those moments where like the world keeps turning, right? Like the world didn't end on November 4th of 2024. Like the world didn't end when like that thing happened, or you found out about whatever, or when you were anxious about X, Y, or Z, right? Like it's just there, and it was beautiful.
I'm gonna send this clip to you next time you start crashing out.
Great. Okay, and so then you're just gonna have it saved already for when you're crashing out.
I don't know if you think that those words will help me.
Let's measure who crashes out more.
I know.
Okay.
I just think it'll be funny to watch you have to process your own advice while crashing out.
You know I don't listen to myself.
Well, you'll have to.
That's why I speak with a font.
That's why we have a podcast. I have something.
Great.
If I had a nickel for every time an ex-boyfriend partner of mine started a SoundCloud account, I would have 2 nickels.
Which isn't a lot.
But it's weird that it happened twice.
And that's from what? Phineas and Ferb?
I have no idea.
And your life.
Yeah. So the first ex-boyfriend, actually phenomenal musician, 10 out of 10. But this last one, I sent a screen recording like manically to a bunch of people.
Yeah, I would fully agree. Manic was the energy of the screen recording.
I was drinking white wine on Kelsey and Edgar's front porch with 2 huskies guarding me. Yeah, it was a little manic.
Nice.
I found my ex-boyfriend, I didn't think had an Instagram, and then he was suggested to me, and I was like, oh my God, he has an Instagram. And then I was like, let's see what he's been doing for the last 2 years, because that's apparently how long he's been having this Instagram. So I checked his tagged photos. Almost all of the tagged photos come from a band that he is a member of. And so I look up the band name on Spotify, can't find it. I'm like, okay, it's got to be linked in their website or in their Instagram bio. And so I go to their website that's linked in their Instagram bio. It shows the like tour dates and stuff. And then there's like a little section at the bottom that has a link to like Apple Music, Spotify, it's contact us, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And so I click on the Spotify link, redirects to a World War I Wikipedia page.
Oh yeah. I've been in that world lately. I get it.
And for why. And then you go to the SoundCloud, listener, they have, and I'm not here to shame,
Sorry.
Except like a little bit because it's not that good.
It's like the train stopped, but not in time, and it killed everyone who was on the tracks.
Yeah. I was talking to Casey about this, sorry, I'll get to, that's a second thought, keeping that in my parking garage. Parking lot. You go to their SoundCloud, they have 2 songs. I'm going to be super honest, they're not good, even for grunge. And nothing was really in tune. Whatever. Anyway, together, between the both of those songs, they have less than 400 listens. And it's just wild to me that I'm the ex with the podcast.
Right.
And he's more embarrassing. Anyway.
I have one more thing to say then.
Okay, yeah.
So I have only heard mentions of this lore, and much like you guys have probably about the friends in our lives who you've now heard a lot about but haven't ever actually met. I definitely had an image of this person, almost said the name, of this person in my head. And, he's largely an amalgamation of like several other people with like similar names or like I felt backstories. And then you sent me the screen recording of this person. And this is how I know I love you and we have known each other for so long. I was like, girl, what the fuck? You were hot in college. Like, I've seen the photos. You're a hot two-trot hot tea in college. And like, while I would not call this man a gremlin, I think you're so far out of his league. It's fucking crazy what I'm seeing right now.
What happened was that he showed an ounce of interest and my brain went, you love me?
Dad?
But Daddy, I love him.
Okay, Ariel. So I just wanted to say that.
So the thing I was going to say is that Casey and I were talking about how it's different editing my story episodes versus your story episodes just because of the different cadence of how we talk.
Right.
I have a tendency to use a lot more filler words, and you speak a little bit more eloquently, but there is more like gaps between things, and so he thinks is what's happening. And I was talking to Casey and I went, yeah, it's because my brain works at the same speed as my mouth and Grant's brain works just a little faster.
Right.
And Casey went, yep, and it's not gotten you into trouble ever. And I went,
Okay, I have a big thing and a small thing to say.
Yeah.
So let's hear the big thing first. How'd you handle that?
Oh,
How did you handle that?
we were like a beer and a
information?
half in. It was funny to me. And also very correct. So I'm not going to be mad about that.
Okay, now here's the small thing.
Yeah.
This is now changing how I am going to teach the dark art of speaking slower than your thought process, which is one of the skills we, bestow upon the
I
speech
would
and
ask
debate
Grant how to
students.
do it, but I'm too scared. I don't actually want to know, and I don't want him to coach me on it because that sounds awful.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything else, like F45. Like, it's a skill that you just have to do enough times with a little bit of pressure under it, aka you'll lose this round if you don't do it right.
You would think having a podcast for 2 years, I would have figured it out.
It's summer, babes. I'm not thinking. Go ahead and put that assumption
Okay,
aside.
cool.
I looked in the mirror at one point today and I was like, I should get a beard trim. Like, that's like smooth brain. I'm like, that's big news for me right now.
No, I get it.
Dark arts. Yeah. No, I mean,
10 out of 10. I have other things, but I realize that we're also recording tomorrow, so.
great. And I have some things I want to say for Patreon tonight. Are we ready
Amazing.
to start main?
I think so.
Ready to start the story?
Ready to start.
How fun. Okay. Hey, I said that the theme of this episode was famous feuds, right?
If you change it on me, I swear to God.
No, I'm right about that, right?
Okay, yeah.
I
yeah, you
woke
are.
up in a dead sweat panic last night.
That you thought you told me the wrong thing.
Yes, I had told you the wrong thing, or that's the episode to come, and I was supposed to be prepping something else.
Oh.
And I had to put together wait, what was the last? It was Alice Rose. That wasn't my theme. It was dead sweat that I had gotten the
I want you to
cadence
know
from.
it wouldn't have mattered. We would have figured it out.
Okay, it's just we're also we're in this period where it's we record a lot, and then there's periods where we don't record a lot. So to have any kind of workflow memory,
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not gonna really hide the title or the main story of this episode. So if you
Spicy.
hear it right away and you're not interested, that's totally fine. This comes as a request from someone on the Discord, and then I completely lost who asked for it.
Nice.
But I wrote it in my little notes
I'm
app.
sure that they will tell us.
Yeah. I think you might have a guess as to what the story is tonight.
No. You said something about
Really?
being really into World War I earlier, and my little ears perked up, but that was about it.
I am so really interested in that. That's not happening tonight, but something will probably come of that at some point.
Okay.
Maia 2 days ago asked me, I'm concerned we're doing the same story. Can you tell me what you're doing? And do you know?
You said George Washington.
Right. And so we're going to start there. From George Washington. Political parties may now and then answer popular ends. They are likely, in the course of time and things, to become potent engines, but which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reign of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion.
Is that his farewell speech?
It's part of his farewell
Okay.
speach. It is famously the thing.
I'm sorry. We need to acknowledge that I got that right. That felt so good.
Keep it in your pants.
No.
Yeah. How did you know that?
I watch a lot of Hamilton.
Okay. Okay.
Also, that is one of the few things I remember from 8-Push. Not the speech, but also the general vibe of the speech was very,
Yeah.
gotta give him the reins.
Yeah.
So you're going to talk about FDR?
Great question. No.
Okay.
This is the portion of his speech that people like to quote when they're like, see, George Washington did not like political parties. Political parties are bad. Today's famous Feuds discussion is going to be on the history of the political parties of America.
Hamilton will get mentioned. If he's not, I actually will riot.
Could you imagine? I'm like, the year's 1900. First half not important. Could you imagine? No.
That was good.
Nice. Nice. Okay, so here's a couple of things. So George Washington's like, oh, like people are going to use political parties and they're going to like seize power and then they're going to like pull the ladder behind them, right? And it's all going to be like unelected and unjust and like that's not good at all. And everyone's like, see, George Washington, he's right. Couple things about George Washington. At the time that he said that, most of the founding fathers, by today's standards, would be considered unelected. We collectively, United States of America, sent the wealthiest people in these states vaguely elected, picked by state assemblies or colonial assemblies at the time, picked by like committees that were writing to each other, like just who are the most important and affluent men in your life, sent them down to Philadelphia, and there, these wealthiest, most resourced men, white men, enslaving white men in this country were like, let's go to revolution. And they dragged...
And Alexander Hamilton.
Correct. But they then dragged 13 colonies into revolution. And obviously that worked out well for us. We won, blah, blah. We're richer than Britain today. Hooray. I mean, we are. I mean, facts are facts. GDP.
Sorry. That musical that I've been super into, Death Becomes Her. If you're a musical girly or whatever and you haven't heard of Death Becomes Her, it is a movie with Meryl Streep in it, but it's now also a musical, and it's fucking incredible. I've listened to the soundtrack about 1 million times. There's that monologue, though, that she says. She's like, when he's like, well, I'm not saying that I would help you kill her, but like, how would we do it? And she goes, well, off the top of my head, you could take this Narcanol, dust it lightly on her wine glass. She passes out from it, and she does this whole thing, and then there's another moment later on where she's plotting how to get the police to show up to this thing while also not claiming like being the victim. And she's like, you call the police. You tell them that you were in here reading when you heard a terrible scream. And then you turn around just in time to see her fall down the stairs.
Listener, she discovered this musical 72 hours ago.
Yeah, I have it all memorized.
Okay, so George Washington is like, watch out for political parties. Watch out for political parties. They're bad and men are going to seize power.
Fall down the stairs.
No, but yes, for real. Meanwhile, it's like, well, like these men with like very vague links to political power dragged us into a war against the world's largest and most powerful empire at the time. And we largely won it because they got distracted with things in France.
Yeah.
And then they like used their wealth to like crystallize power, like just for themselves. And then like all but like maybe 2 presidents have like then continued to come from that class of people. But no, you're right, babe. It's going to be a real change.
And people say Grant doesn't know history.
Who?
Someone on TikTok.
And then, yeah, I saw some of those comments and I'm like, you're dumb. So I'm actually going to present to you, listener, like a different narrative than what you are probably prepared for or expecting. It's very vogue. It's very in the know right now to be like political parties are bad and they're dangerous for our democracy. I'm actually going to present to you a theory over the next however long this episode is. You know, I don't.
10.5 minutes,
right,
including the Gracie period. That's how long original oratory has to be.
Very good. Very good.
I'm a level 2 accredited judge.
Okay, now speak slower than your brain.
No.
I'm going to present a theory to you that political parties are actually really good for America. And one of the things that makes our democracy really stable at its roots, even if up in the branches things seem to be swaying and falling down, and the National Guard just got mobilized to California against the state's wishes. Like at the top level, things seem horrific. Why at the core, America's political parties grant it a degree of political stability that other countries really do wish they could experience and just don't.
Are we going to go into why they don't?
Why other countries?
Yeah.
No, actually, this story ends up being so like kind of large and wieldy that I have to only talk about the U.S., but I can always answer any questions. And I'm going to kind of start off actually to like help boost my case before we get into the history of it all, but also to kind of answer this question with a quick little anecdote. So years ago.
It's giving original oratory so much right now. I feel like I'm in a room judging a kid.
I have judged at this point hundreds of kids in original oratory, so this shouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah, well, I know.
Years ago, I was coaching students on a debate topic, and the topic was essentially, this house regrets political parties. And I had to help them coach the opposite. Like, no, political parties aren't bad and maybe actually are good. And we used this example, and it comes from science culture newspaper. I forget which. Couldn't track it down now.
Science culture newspaper.
It basically argued that the entire plot of Star Wars, would not have happened if in the Galactic Senate there was an organized opposition party.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That like the democratic benefit to political parties is that regardless of who is in power, there is another group of people actively in that elected government who doesn't want you in power. And while that might feel unproductive from a legislative standpoint, it's actually perhaps the most important check on political power in our entire system.
Yeah.
Because a political party can, as we've seen here in the United States, infect all three branches of our government.
Right.
But as long as we are still allowed to elect an opposition party from various strongholds and bastions across the country, there will always be a check on that political power, which is why concerns about the U.S. slipping into fascism are like good and well researched and like well reasoned. But like watching the California congressional delegation like organize and rally against what's happening, right? To watch, even if we disagree with the strategy, the Democratic Party move against the Republican Party. And during the Biden years, the Republicans move against the Democrats. It's like a key to our democracy. So this is not like a sad story about like the slow poison that's been killing America, but like actually maybe the thing that we accidentally got right by ignoring dad, aka George Washington, and developing political parties.
Yeah.
We're going to break this like story down into 6 parts. Some are going to be really short. Some are going to be longer.
Okay.
All of them are going to have a main character. Maya, are you ready?
No.
Okay. We're going to start talking about the first party system. Main character, Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yes! Yes, it's all come down to this moment. I can quit it all.
I want you to know, I wrote this entire episode, and then I was like, gonna have to kind of give them some access points for this to be funny, and like I need to frame it. And then I went in and like entered main characters for each one. And after a while, I was like, well, that's not unique enough. That's not quirky enough. I got to really get into it. This
Give
one
me Lin.
came right away. Lin-Manuel Miranda. So the first party system actually starts before America as an organized democratic governing system starts.
Right.
Because America, before the American Revolution, 1776, is when the Declaration of Independence happens. We then immediately are fighting a war, but by and large, we consider 1776 the birth of the American government. Before that moment, there are state assemblies or colonial assemblies, and they have somewhat similar political affiliations as the United Kingdom or Great Britain does. It's largely the Whigs versus the Tories. I know.
I always forget that it's not wigs like wigs, you know?
There's an H in there.
Yeah, for some reason.
Okay, so Ken, let me ask you this. Do you know what the Whigs and Tories represented?
The wigs were conservative.
And the Tories were?
Not.
So
I don't know.
Listen, that's a great guess. We're going to get to that in like 60 seconds. The Whigs and Tories represented in the United Kingdom. The Whigs represented a group of people that believed, hey, we should have a democracy, at least kind of. We should like elect people to government, and then those people who we elected should have kind of some power to do things.
It's crazy that our government like came from somewhere. Like we didn't always have. That's crazy. Yeah. I have never. You just broke the fourth wall. Oh my God.
There's gonna be a couple of moments like that today. Because then the Tories were like, no, the king should do it. And so here's a surprise. When we declared independence, it wasn't popular to be like, the king should do it.
Yeah.
And so we declare our independence, and kind of immediately the Tories kind of disappear. Some of them literally get on a boat back to England. I'm not even joking. The first self-deportations in America, where people are like, where people were like, I kind of bet a lot on the whole king
gotta
thing.
leave, yeah.
No, for reals. And we called them the Loyalists.
The Loyalists. That feels right.
And so they're there beforehand. Political party ends. The revolution happens. control of the 13 colonies ends. And now basically there's just the Whigs, right? And what we're going to see time and time again is that the American political system abhors supremacy. If you have reached kind of like a monolithic moment, enjoy the brief high, Icarus, because you're going to come crashing down to earth. And so, first pop quiz. Who was Alexander Hamilton, a.k.a. Lin-Manuel Miranda in the musical Hamilton? Who was his, like, kind of really actual number one political enemy?
Well, first, Thomas Jefferson.
Correct. That's good.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that the one that you wanted?
That's not the person that kills him. I wanted Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, okay.
You have, right after the American Revolution, the forming of two political parties, the Federalist and then the Anti-Federalist.
Right.
And we are still, by the way, listener, not in a discussion of like, well, I believe in equal rights. Well, I believe like in a regressive tax structure. We are at this early stage of things talking about like, should there be a government and who? And it can do war, okay? And then what else? What else does government do? No idea is a bad idea. No governing, no quartering of soldiers. That's interesting. Put it on the board. Let's see if that sticks. It does, turns out. Federalist, Anti-Federalist it's a discussion as to the role of the United States government.
Okay.
Because right as soon as we are done fighting the American Revolution, there is this national government known as the Articles of Confederation, and it doesn't have a president.
Right,
it has a Congress, and it takes all 13 states to decide on something for us to do anything. We essentially create the EU.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's real discussion at this time that the 13 colonies, having banded together for their independence, might now fracture into the kind of the smaller states that we see in Europe, right? Couple things prevent that from happening. First, everyone's broke. Like everyone's broke, and all of these people are your neighbors, and pooling your resources are going to help a little bit more. There's no way any of these states can fight off a European power, and Spain, France, and Great Britain are all around North America at the time. But there is also still kind of like, we fought together, we should form a country. And so it kind of becomes the United States in America. And then they form the Constitution because the Federalists are like, this isn't working. Oh, and by the way, all these rebellions that keep happening in your states that you don't have any ability to like take care of, like Bacon's Rebellion, for example, we could take care of that with a federal government. Because basically rebellions would happen. Governors would be like, quick, shoot them. And they'd be like, who? But if like people from Vermont could march in or South Carolina or whatever, that'd help a lot. And so that's the first two political parties. And that's actually where we get our first real benefit from having a two-party political system. The Federalists ultimately end up winning because the U.S. Constitution gets implemented. But the Anti-Federalists also get an important concession. And we call that concession the Bill of Rights.
Right. Okay.
Because the Federalists is like lots of power to the central government. And the Anti-Federalists are like, but there needs to be some kind of guardrails. And so we view these as two founding documents as basically the same thing, but they come from the two opposite, the two parties, the two opposite spectrums of the political system.
Yeah.
And then the Federalists are like, we were right. Ooh, yeah. And then Thomas Jefferson's like, well, I have some ideas. Yeah. And he forms the Democratic Republican Party.
Motherfucking Democratic Republicans.
Okay. Is that in Hamilton?
Yeah.
I have seen it but twice.
Okay, that's clearly not enough. I have the entire musical memorized.
Have you seen that incredible Trisha Paytas quote? And she goes, yeah, I mean, I voted for Biden because he like quoted Hamilton.
Yes.
And they go, and the people talking to her goes, well, what? And she goes, yeah, you know, like in one of his speeches, he says like, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. And they're like, are you fucking kidding us, Trisha? It's the fucking Constitution and the Declaration of Independence.
When you're so dumb, you're still right.
Yeah, like... no, I know. I mean, Queen pop off, you know, but okay. So the Democratic Republicans, here's what's important to know. We do not get today's modern Democratic Party from them. We do not get today's modern Republican Party from them. We don't really get any of our current political parties from them. But they immediately help provide this counterweight to the Federalist. And the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans go back and forth for a little bit. And this entire era is called the first party system. You with me so far?
Yeah, I think so.
But we're seeing in some of this.
Is there going to be a DBQ? I need to know.
I hate grading DBQs slightly less than I hate putting them together, but it's a whole document-based question for those of us who
didn't take an AP test in history.
Let's see. What did I write here? Yep. Okay, great. Did that. Oh, here's something fun. In addition to having two political parties, we now have two political parties that more or less represent different parts of American culture.
Right.
So the Federalists represent cities and a more upper class, while the Democratic Republicans represent a more rural areas. And it's during this time too, where there's like this dream of like America being just like a country of farmers, and everyone's gonna like farm their own food, and like we're all our own American revolution, and we're all independent. I know. And then like there's like the Schuyler sisters in New York who are like, no, that sounds awful. I want to be rich and in New York.
Yeah.
Which is the only way to live life.
Especially as a woman.
For reals. And so you had the first kind of creation of like regionally specific political power. And that's now also creating, we can't quite yet put left wing, right wing onto it.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
It's starting to take those shapes a little bit. And during my research, I found at least one person who told me where we get left wing and right wing from.
Tell me.
In France.
Okay.
During the French Revolution.
Excellent.
If you were a supporter or defender or apologist for the French monarch, you were on the right side of the chamber. And if you opposed him, you were on the left side of the chamber.
Great, so it's completely unoriginal.
Yes. But then, they kill the monarch.
Yep.
And then they were like left wing, right wing. This still really works. And it kind of gets applied loosely to a bunch of different political systems in Europe where if you were opposed to change, if you were someone that we would call like a traditionalist of like, why upset the apple cart? This system works. You'd be called a right wing ideology.
Okay.
Because you kind of supported the way things had always been.
Yeah.
And if you were in any way trying to change society, you were kind of left wing because you could kind of name it as progressive. Fun fact, not everyone benefits under progressive policies, right?
What?
Like, for instance, one thing we could change is we could make all women stay at home. And that policy might be seen as progressive because it's changing the way things had been. So it's important to remember, too.
That's crazy.
Yes. Correct. Sorry. We get Washington, Adams. Adam loses to Jefferson. Right. These are our first three presidents. And then after Jefferson comes Madison. Here's what's really fun. Madison helps write the Federalist Papers. Politically is a Democratic Republican. And so the Democratic Republicans get 2 wins in a row. Madison is president during the War of 1812 when America kind of gets too big for its britches, but also like Great Britain was treating us like a vassal state. They kept stealing American sailors off of boats they would find in the Atlantic.
Christ, what?
They'd be like, oh, your mind's now. You shouldn't have been American and like sailing in the Atlantic. Maybe. And we're like, that's actively war crimes. And even worse, theft. And then we like fought. We wanted to make Canada like the 14th state, if that sounds familiar at all or anything. And then Great Britain came in and was literally like, ha ha ha, fire everywhere. And that's when Washington, D.C. burns down.
Right.
But then like, I mean, we don't win, we don't lose. There's this whole like thing that happens. Andrew Jackson takes New Orleans. It's like a whole thing. And then Great Britain's like, we have so many other things to do. We don't even like you. You're so ugly. We're leaving. And America's like, we won, bitches. We won. And everyone's like, America, hell yeah. And it's 1812.
And here we are in 2025.
I'm not even joking. Do you know what we call this period?
Oh, God.
The era of good feelings. We win our second war, and we're like, era of good feelings. Here we go. Because what's happening is the Democratic Republicans are strangling to death the Federalists. They have completely lost political power. Madison's president in 1812, and then we have President Monroe, who gets elected in, I believe, what year do I have it? 1816 and 1820.
Okay.
Do you know what President Monroe is famous for?
No.
He is famous for the Monroe Doctrine.
Yes, okay.
And that Monroe Doctrine says, hey, Europe, Western Hemisphere, that's our space. So we can get up into anywhere we want in Western Hemisphere. You're in Panama, we're in Panama. You're in Cuba, you're in Cuba. You have a plantation, we have a plantation. I have democracy, you cannot have. And literally all the European powers are like, who's talking to us right now? I hear a voice that's just so tiny and insignificant
that it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. These like tertiary colonies that I continue to make a shit ton of money off of.
Yeah.
Like whatever. Also, Monroe is not like, hey, colonies, you okay with this? Monroe's like, this is ours now, okay? So maybe we want some colonies. How do you feel about that? Meanwhile, literally enslaved blacks at this time, also African people and indigenous people are like, oh, so just changing masters. Cool. But America's like, foreign policy, hell yeah. Like electric guitar. Era of good feeling, not a lie. But you know,
Jesus Christ.
How would you describe my relationship with medicine in my 20s?
You didn't see a doctor for like a decade. So I think relationship is a strong word.
Right. So like kind of ignoring the things that were actively making me sick. This is one of the many times I'm going to talk to y'all about slavery.
Nice. Nice. Not to the slavery, but nice to learning about it.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Originally, one of the sticking points of the Constitution was the, quote, issue of slavery, or more specifically, the perceived legal right that wealthy white Americans had to owning at this stage largely black Americans.
Right.
Black people who'd been born in what we were now calling the United States. We get taught in school that there's all of these wonderful compromises that happen when it comes to the Constitution. And like these compromises show American ingenuity when it comes to governance. Hooray, democracy. But these compromises did two things. They set into legal code that black Americans could be enslaved and should be considered less than.
Right.
And second, and kind of also really important, kick the can of the issue down the road. At the time, I think there was concern that if the 13 colonies tried to address slavery head on, slavery would spread to all 13 colonies or result in a bitter war. I'd remind you all that slavery did spread.
Yes.
And that the confrontation of it did result in a war.
Yes.
A war in which 3 million Americans died when our population was significantly smaller than it is now.
It's still considered like one of the most violent wars.
Yeah, it's the deadliest war in American history because it was Americans killing Americans. So America's not addressing the issue of slavery. And a lot of these like grand compromises that we get from this period actually end up really damaging our democracy. For instance, the United States Senate preserved power between enslaving states and states where that practice was illegal or discouraged. So it maintained the political balance even when populations or economies were going to change.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and that was intentional. And your 8th grade social studies teacher treated that like God's gift to governance.
Yeah.
But what it actually did was granted political legitimacy to people who are committing some of the worst human rights violations you possibly could against another human being.
Yeah.
There's the 3/5 compromise, in which enslaved black Americans were considered 3/5 a person in terms of electoral votes and congressional representation, but were not actually granted the right to vote
to gain political power off of bodies
or even legal personhood.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. That largely is going to define the first 2 party systems that we're going to read, and we'll see its fingerprints throughout the entire system. When we say slavery is America's original sin, we really mean it across the board. It's so clearly diagnosable in our political systems.
Interesting.
But we're kicking that can down the road. There's plenty.
Just like they did.
Right, correct. There's plenty of land for us to move into because we keep committing genocide against Native Americans. And that crime means the crime of enslavement can be ignored. So when I said the era of good feelings.
It's only good feelings for a very select few.
Correct, 100%. But democracy's finally working for them.
Okay.
1824 rolls around and we see some pretty big changes in America. The 2 elections before, like for instance, 1820, Monroe runs uncontested. He's like largely the only person on the political ballot.
Imagine.
We have single digit voter turnout at a time when like 8 people were allowed to vote in this country. Like it's so low. And like you're going to learn on this episode, America's political system hates power supremacy.
Right.
And so 1820, Democratic Republicans are at the height of their power. 1824, there are 4 candidates for president, and all of them are Democratic Republicans.
Oh my God.
They formed political parties within the political party and run a bunch of them.
Oh my
Here's
God.
what I wrote.
Okay.
1824 sees America's political system change in a big way. America's a big country with lots of problems and opinions, and now lots of different approaches to them. That is actually the problem with having only one national party. There isn't enough space for the range of political opinions. The election's messy. It features 4 candidates. Here's the 2 you need to know.
Okay.
John Quincy Adams
Right.
and Andrew Jackson.
Right.
Hamilton fans, because remember, Lin-Manuel Miranda is the main character of this section.
Lynn Hamilton.
John Adams.
I know him. That can't be. That's that little guy who spoke to me.
I don't
all
remember
those
what
years
adjective.
ago.
We're getting the
What
singing
was it?
podcast back.
83? 85?
His son,
Okay.
John Quincy Adams.
Oh, man.
I don't know what John Quincy Adams did to people, but he does not come off well in like any history I've ever read about him. They're like this sick, pale, gross-looking freak pervert whose dad was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Was president. Like just absolutely ravaged.
So it was another father-son duo.
Yes,
I don't think
correct.
I knew that there was a different...
Yeah.
That they were related.
That's the
Yeah.
work of historians.
Oh,
There's
okay.
like John Adams, who was mistreated in his one term, and then his son, who also got but one term. Because in a 4-person national election, no one receives a majority of the votes.
Right.
Or a majority of the electoral college. But one person receives more votes and more electoral college votes than anyone else. And that person's name is Andrew Jackson. And so naturally, the House of Representatives elects John Quincy Adams.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Now. It's going to give me a chance to take a sip of whiskey.
Yeah, which
which
good.
we love.
Yeah.
Please explain the Electoral College to
Oh,
all of our
fucking
non-American listeners and at least 51% of our American listeners.
It's the dumbest shit to ever exist. Basically, based off of a state's population, they are given a certain number of electoral college votes. So there's 2 different ways you can determine an election win, technically. An electoral college win and a popular vote win. A popular vote win is literally how many Americans voted for each candidate. An electoral college win is how many states voted for that particular candidate. And there's only a few states that will split their electoral college based off of counties. I think Nebraska is one of them. But otherwise, in the state of Colorado, if the majority of people voted Democrat, which has been true for the last couple of elections, all of our electoral college votes will go to the Democratic candidate, regardless of how many people actually voted for a Republican candidate.
In the state of Florida in 2000, with at the time, I believe, 24 electoral votes, which is a significant number.
Yeah.
You need 270 to win.
Mm-hmm.
The state of Florida was decided by 300 votes, and all 24 of their electoral college votes, 10% of what a candidate needs to win, all 24 were awarded to them because of the electoral college.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So that's how you can get in America. A candidate wins the most votes in the national election.
Another reason that slavery, or that they had 3/5 of a compromise.
Very good, Maya. Yes,
Wow.
exactly. The Electoral College exists solely because Southern states realized they would lose every single national election if they
only went off of legal person.
right, if they only went off their legal personhood. But if you wanted to be able to hold the political power of these vaguely people-looking actual Black American people without granting them political rights themselves, you have to find some fun way to do the math. And the 3/5 compromise births the Electoral College.
Do you know why it was 3/5? It just feels like such a random.
Well, if
fraction.
you were a white enslaver, you could not say that a Black enslaved person should count as a full person, because then
Right.
you were saying in a legal document that this is a whole
Human that I am
being.
doing all of these atrocious things
Right.
to.
And many northern politicians, understanding that they were trying to pervert the political process, were like, if you are going to enslave them and give them no legal recognition as a human being, they should receive no political representation.
Yes.
I don't get extra votes because I have horses.
Yes.
Like if you're going to treat them
yeah.
as livestock, you shouldn't get political. And so from those 2 viewpoints, America's great ability for compromise, as long as it's not a white man compromise.
God forbid.
Settles on 3/5.
Okay. It just feels like 3/4 was right there, you know?
Right.
3/5.
Or literally half.
Yeah. It's just like,
Yeah,
bro.
no, yeah.
Okay.
I'll say this too, chalking up my own like blind spots here. There might be more legal written stuff about it. This part of American history, I'm not as much of an expert on as elsewhere, but that's what it is. So John Quincy Adams comes in second, both electoral college votes and popular votes, but he wins the election anyways. Because do you know what happens if no one gets a majority of the electoral college votes?
I have no idea.
There's a process in place. It's so interesting.
I feel like you've told me about the process, but I don't remember it.
So you go to each state's House delegation. Forget the Senate.
Jesus.
Just the House delegation.
Right.
Okay. That House delegation has to come up with a decision for how that state will vote. And forget electoral college votes. We're doing raw state votes now. So here's what this means. In the state of California, which has 51 members of the House of Representatives, the 51 members have to come to an agreement as to who they're going to vote for. Traditionally, they're going to cast their vote for the Democrat. So California casts one vote for the Democrat.
Oh, I didn't know it was one.
The state of Delaware, which has a one member of the House
gets to vote who they voted for anyway.
So
that's so funny.
Literally 40 million Californians and one man from Delaware.
How many does Rhode Island have? Is it still just
they
one?
They have 2 members of the House.
They have 2?
Yes. Rhode Island has 2. New Hampshire has 2. Maine has 2.
And Delaware's the only one with just 1?
No. Vermont has 1. Wyoming has 1.
That's wild.
Delaware
I didn't realize
has 1.
that Rhode Island was so dense.
Alaska has 1.
Right.
In fact, I think it actually might be split evenly. Oh, North Dakota and South Dakota both have 1.
Okay.
And then it's just raw who has won the most states. It's like a simple tally. I know it's crazy. This is, as far as I'm aware, the only time we've actually had to use it.
This is the only benefit of having 51 states instead of 50 states in case this ever happens.
Yeah, literally so true.
Yeah.
Like there's a huge flaw in the system. John Quincy Adams wins. And as a reward for winning, his political party explodes. John Quincy Adams' political party explodes so quickly that even on Wikipedia, he is not viewed as a member of the Democratic Republican Party. He is viewed as a member of the National Republican Party. Because Andrew Jackson, obviously bitter for not being president,
right.
becomes the figurehead of a new political party.
Sorry, I have a question from like several minutes ago.
It's okay.
So you have to win a majority of the electoral college votes, like regardless of how many people theoretically are in the race? Because yeah, so that's why it's
50.1
because there was because there was 4 candidates. Okay,
we're going to see that happen a couple times in American history, by the way.
Wild.
So John Quincy Adams becomes president and leader of the National Republican Party.
Andrew Jackson pissed.
Right. Still no relation to the actual Republican Party that we know today.
So wild to
Andrew
me.
Jackson pissed, obviously has a huge base of political support.
Yeah.
He becomes the figurehead of a new political party. Do you want to guess what it is?
No.
The Democratic Party.
Okay, I was going to say that, and I was like, I don't want to look stupid.
DBQ, answer now.
No.
Answer now or lose all 7 points. And this is the Democratic Party that we know.
Okay.
So
Started by Andrew Jackson. That's crazy.
Yeah. Correct. You are reading that correctly.
Just as crazy as Andrew Jackson.
So that's the election of 1824. And here's what I wrote. The old system blows up. Andrew Jackson helps launch the Democratic Party, the one that we know today. And then Andrew Jackson goes on to win the election of 1828. John Quincy Adams represents the National Republican ticket, and it's going to fade away almost instantly into obscurity, and no one's going to care at all about it. The Democrats are at one end, and they are especially popular in the South and West, the Democratic Party. And the Whigs are going to kind of be resurrected out of the grave, and they're going to be very popular in the North.
Okay, and the Whigs on the across the pond
were
the people that were like pro government.
Right.
Fuck
and,
the
But now obviously
monarch,
they're
yeah.
having their own political
Yeah,
evolution.
yeah.
But yes, that's where
Okay.
the Whig term kind of gets pulled from the grave because it's basically if you're not a Democrat, what are you? It's all these other political
Right.
parties and
Right.
affiliations and thoughts, and they're all getting pulled together into one. And 1824 marks the end of the first party system
Okay.
and the start of the second party system.
Okay.
And it's at the start of the second party system, you have the birth of the Democratic Party.
Okay. So first party system was the Federalists versus the Democratic Republicans. And then towards the end of that, we get the Democratic Republicans splitting into a bunch of different sects.
Correct.
And then we go into the second party system, which is now the Democratic Party
Yep.
against the Whigs.
Correct.
Because the National Republicans have faded.
Correct.
Okay.
And you're going to see at several moments a lot of experimentation around political parties, but that our system naturally reverts to
Back
two.
to two. Yeah.
1828 rolls around. Andrew Jackson's the leader of the party. He's super popular amongst people because how do you even like kind of help wrestle Andrew Jackson's personality
You
together?
don't. I actually think he really didn't want to be wrestled.
Right. No, correct.
Yeah.
Correct. He's okay. So Andrew Jackson might be perceived by some historians as like kind of the first people's president. And I want you to think
Okay.
about the election of 1824, the one that he lost, but actually got more votes than anyone else for.
Right.
John Quincy Adams is a Nepo baby. He's a New England born and raised. His name is identical to a person who has already been
Right.
president. He is this classic, old school kind of brain trust, hive mind collection of individuals that have been running the country so far. However, the country's changed a lot since
Right.
1776. It's only been 50 years, which is a person's lifetime. But
Yeah.
you have out west, and when we say out west, we do mean like Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky,
The Midwest
Missouri.
right now.
Right. We
Yeah.
haven't even really gone over the Mississippi or the Missouri, right? We're like kind of in between those two rivers. But out west, you have a bunch of farmers who are frontiersmen and cutting down woods and like building log cabins that
Right.
very famously Abraham Lincoln will be born into.
Right.
And their lives are so detached
yeah.
from the political power of Boston, Philadelphia, and New York that they are very much not interested in whatever political party that is. And then you have the South, which is always viewed itself as the kind of the political adversary of the North in that way. And so strange bedfellows make good company kind of situation. The South and West couple up because what they have in common is that they're not New England. And what the West wants is federal support for continuing
Right.
to colonize land that had been
Indigenous.
and now no longer is. And the South really likes that because the South wants to expand slavery as much as possible. It's around this time that the South begins to be really concerned about the future of slavery because slavery, the institution itself, is the cornerstone of their entire,
Right.
not economy, entire way of life.
What are they calling it? Because they didn't say like we want to expand slavery.
No,
did
they did.
They did?
They're like, there should be slavery in every county in America.
Jesus
Correct.
Christ.
And a quick way to start that is putting slavery into every new county in America.
My God.
And so you have Andrew Jackson, who is from Kentucky, Tennessee, which today we view as decidedly Southern, and at the time was like largely kind of viewed more as a Midwestern state, like we would understand it today. Andrew Jackson, he's the president that does the Trail of Tears, which is that horrific forced removal of indigenous populations further west.
Right. You know what I learned on the podcast we're working on with Aileen? That our U.S. postal routes were initially carved by the indigenous, like they were indigenous trails.
I'm not shocked by that at all.
That's crazy to me.
I also love the name that you have come up with. People of Agency?
You came up with that.
Did I really?
Yes, you came up with that.
It's a great name.
We're working through.
Wait, shut up.
Yeah, yes.
Good for me.
Because I texted that to Aileen and she went, "How does he do it?"
No wonder I
yeah.
speak with a font.
You do.
I read it and I was like, fuck, that's a good name.
I think there's 3 names that we're like considering right now. Underpinnings is Aileen's idea, and the other 2 are both yours.
What's the other one?
Departmentalized.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Bro.
That's really funny. Hire me, I guess. I don't know.
I actively have. I'm working on trying to pay you.
Okay, so now that we're in the second party system, we need a new character, okay?
Yes.
Our main character is dun, 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 dun,
Ba, ba, da, ba.
Richard Mentor Johnson of Kentucky.
Never heard of him in my life.
Down. Second political party system is just kind of weird. Like there's no other way of all of the party systems that we're going to cover tonight. This was the one that took me the most like, okay, what? And then
what?
like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? Okay. Cause like it feels very much like an era of American politics in which nothing important happens because they refuse to do the important things that are about to happen.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
When does the Civil War technically start?
1860.
Okay, so we have a good 50 years ish.
1860, 25.
25.
Oh, hold on. Well, let's split the difference.
I forgot what year you said. I just remembered it was okay. Cool.
The second political era is actually really evenly matched between the Democrats and the Whigs in terms of who is achieving political power. So you have Andrew Jackson, who serves 2 terms, and then he's immediately followed by his hand-picked successor, Martin Van Buren.
Martin Van Buren.
Martin Van Buren. And as happens time and time again with Taft, with George H.W. Bush, really popular presidents hand-picking their successor just doesn't really work out.
No.
They serve 1 term and everyone's like, you're not the guy we liked. Get out of here. But then this is the time where you have like President Tyler, you have President Fillmore, you have Democrats and whips, Whigs. Democrats and Whigs. Whip's an actual political term, though, too, which is crazy. Democrats and Whigs are going back and forth in terms of sharing political party.
A political term power in the U.S.?
Yeah. Do you not know that?
No. Does it look like does this face look like I knew that?
I don't know. I'm a nerd, so I don't know what is and is not common knowledge. In
me whenever I teach you about anything related to science or math.
It's funny that you think I've been listening.
I know.
I just don't have the brain for it. In political chambers in America, the person in charge of their entire political party, so the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, of the Republicans in the House, their title is Majority Leader.
Right.
Do you know the name of their deputy?
No.
Majority Whip. Because their job is to whip votes for it.
I'm obsessed with that.
I'm so glad I was able to teach all of you that.
I had no idea.
Yeah. No, I oftentimes thought like if I were to ever go into political office, which is never going to happen, this podcast has sank the last of those hopes, but I didn't want to do this. I would want to be whip. Majority leader, you're always at a press conference. That looks annoying.
Yeah.
Me being like, it'd be a shame if people saw those photos of your trip in Cancun last October.
He is Hoover.
But it's all for a good cause. You know, it's like evil mobilized for like the greater good.
Oh my God.
So Democrats and Whigs continue to share power, continue to ignore larger issues. And it's during this time that America's great ingenuity for compromise comes out.
Jesus.
You have the Missouri Compromise that happens during this time.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, the state of Missouri under its current political systems can actually go like above a certain parallel, and it can enslave black people. We think that's cool because we have a crystal clear moral compass. But then we're going to set a parallel, and below there, all slavery all the time.
Yeah.
And above there, no slavery none of the time. And that works for like 12 years. And then Franklin Pierce, also known as, quote, America's hottest president. Google pictures of Franklin Pierce. It's crazy. Passes the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And he was like, what if in every state people got to vote? And Nebraska was like, we're going to vote no. And Kansas is like, I'll kill you. Is that John Brown?
Okay. He's got some smolder going on. He does have a receding hairline, like big time, though. It almost looks like he's bald on one half of his head.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
So we're going to talk about Martin Van Buren for a second. The third president into this era.
Right.
Jackson's elected in 28 and 32, so Van Buren's elected in 36.
Right.
His vice presidential candidate is Richard M. Johnson, our main character.
Okay.
From Kentucky.
Okay.
This is like this weird... How do I... like... I chose Richard M. Johnson. I'm saying his name right? I learned about him through this story.
That's
through this
crazy.
Research. Yes. Richard M. Johnson ends up kind of being this like weird little microcosm for this moment where the institution of slavery is the only political issue at the time. Technically, Texas is about to be admitted into the Union, right? You're going to see stuff like that happen. Texas is going to get admitted, and then we're going to admit Maine to help make sure we can keep the political balance in the Senate. Free state, slave state, stuff like
crazy that Maine was the counterweight.
We're going to
Texas.
introduce we're going to introduce Missouri and Iowa at the same time.
Okay.
Right? We're going to try to maintain balance as much as we can. Richard M. Johnson served in the Kentucky state legislature.
Okay. And
then served in the U.S. House of Representatives as a congressman from Kentucky.
Right.
Wins on the ticket with Van Buren in 36.
Right.
And then while in Washington, everyone's like, holy shit, you have a black wife.
Oh.
And that black wife is technically enslaved by Richard Johnson's father.
Oh my God.
And what did his wife, whose name is Julia Chin, feel about this entire situation?
Oh my God.
We don't know. Those papers are lost to history. Why would you save a woman's writing, let alone a black woman's writing?
Oh my God.
However, their mixed race children are given Johnson's last name, and Johnson insists that they are educated at the school he founds called the Choctaw Academy, because of course they named it after the indigenous people they had just driven out
of the area.
And so in reading about this person, I was like, wait, is this like a whole separate story?
Yeah.
And I want you guys to know, there's a chance, there's like a 25% chance I do a full Patreon episode on Julia Chin, his wife. Yeah. Because there's not enough for a full story. Yeah. But it's a really interesting story.
That's a good call.
Where it's like... the political issue of the time of like the American genocide against Native Americans and the continued genocide of Black Americans under the institution of slavery are like these huge boiling issues demanding to be taken care of. And you have this man who's elected as vice president of the United States in 1836.
Right.
Who, because of his black wife, or at least a woman he calls his wife, and she, because she has no agency at all,
can't say anything.
Right. And maybe they had a loving relationship. Maybe it was literally the worst setting, and she was an equal partner.
The power dynamic is there, though, and you can't ignore it.
No, it's so there. Yeah. He is kicked off the Democratic ticket in 1840 because of his black wife. And his two black children. And it's well known enough that there's political cartoons horrifically racist about him trying to control, quote, the 3 black women, like in his life. Good news for him, though. 1840, Martin Van Buren loses re-election. He gets off the ship before it fully sinks.
Fair.
He then goes back to Kentucky, gets elected back into the Kentucky state legislature.
That's crazy.
Dies. We out.
Cool.
But it's like, the issues of Native American and indigenous treatment, the issues of Black Americans and enslavement, it's all right there wrapped up in one very weird man who is also vice president, who is representing this new wave of political orientation of this country.
He's got a bunch of freaky guys as vice president.
Kind of, like, yeah. They're like...
Sans Harris, obviously.
Right. And then you have... who were the... Oh, shit, hold on a second. I'm trying to remember the... gay dude that wasn't Lincoln. It wasn't Martin Van Buren, was it?
I can't remember names like that.
Was it Buchanan?
Buchanan sounds right.
Yeah. And his lover, like Polk or Tyler or something. Yeah. So they're like, Johnson, you get your black wife out of here before me and my husband are upset about this entire situation. Anyways, crazy that women want the right to vote, like just an absolute toxic mix of everything.
Yes.
And this entire era is defined by our inability to address the issue of slavery. But also, in a weird way, you don't have a super clear north-south divide at this time. Mississippi and New York vote for the same presidential candidate on a handful of occasions during this era.
Jeez.
No, I know. And so you're seeing a switch back and forth between Democrats and Republicans. They're not taking care of the issues they need to. They're kind of trying to compromise, not really. American colonialism is starting to expand a little bit more. You're seeing, quote, manifest destiny, also known as I'll shoot anything in my way. I want that. Texas becomes part of the country. And it's just this weird political time where everyone seems to be closing their eyes. And it's going to end with the thing that they needed to address. The second party system is our shortest party system because of this. And it ends, some say, in 1856 because you have Fremont is his name, out of California, runs for presidency on the Republican ticket.
Okay.
A brand new party made up of mainly people we would know as free soilers who opposed the expansion of slavery on even an inch of American soil. So because they're not addressing any of the actual main political issues of America at the time, you see several third parties start up during the second party system trying to address those issues exactly.
Right.
You see a spirited attempt at multi-party viability during this time. You have the famous, quote, Know Nothing Party, famously connected to John Wilkes Booth, who are vehemently anti-immigrant, specifically anti-Catholic. You also have free soiler people who oppose the expansion of slavery to even, quote, an inch of American soil. You also have at this time not so much a political party as it is like a political movement, people called abolitionists, who are not a majority in really kind of any circle that they run, but who believe in the abolition of slavery.
Okay.
But a huge issue to the abolitionist movement is everyone's like, how do we achieve abolition without violence?
Is there any Venn diagram connection between free soilers and abolitionists? Like, could you be both?
Yes.
Okay.
Free soilers was basically the party all abolitionists belonged to, but kind of in the interest of advocating for politically pragmatic things, like let's actually try to accomplish something, you would oppose the expansion of slavery into, like, for instance, Oklahoma and New Mexico and Arizona. But at the same time,
like they're trying to stop the flow, and then they're going to handle.
Right.
Okay.
But abolitionism is not even a majority held opinion by like Abraham Lincoln. Like everyone's like, I hate slavery. Slavery's awful. I don't see how we end it in the South.
Yeah, how are we going to get our sugar?
Right.
After
So
this?
let's not expand it elsewhere. Or even if it's not like, some people are worried about the economic consequences of ending slavery during this time. More people are worried about just the practicality of it. How do I end slavery without forcing at gunpoint these white men who refuse to give it up? And white women too. But women had no political power in the South either.
Right.
But they were definitely benefiting from like the system that they had created.
Yes. Yeah.
How do we get these people to free Black Americans without literally holding a gun to them?
Right.
And because many of them were like, you will shoot me dead before you take the
these.
hundreds of Black enslaved people I have enslaved. And so abolitionism just isn't seen as like a politically pragmatic thing.
Yeah.
And then something really fortuitous happens. The second political system ends.
Nice.
And the third party system begins with the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860.
Right.
Do you know what happens almost immediately after the election in 1860?
Oh, John Wood. Harper's Ferry? No.
John Brown.
John Brown. Brown. Who's John Wood?
And then
John Wood is
Booth.
is the guy with the arm in the smoker. That's who John Wood is.
I mean, truthfully, yeah, probably a Confederate.
He probably.
So you have this like
John Brown and Harper's Ferry.
So you have this fun moment, and we'll see it time and time again in like kind of political philosophy of what happens when a political party grows too big to properly hold all the political opinions within it.
Yes.
And that's what happens in 1860.
And now.
Right. No, correct. Yes. That was not me trying to like hide the lead. Yeah. In 1860, the Democratic Party is struggling because there is the Southern Democrats who want slavery everywhere, who view the Fugitive Slave Act as a permission to set up plantations in upstate New York, to hunt down people in Philadelphia and Boston. That's the Southern Democratic Party. And then you have like a much more like morally duplicit Northern Democratic Party, which is also kind of out west, where you have like a bunch of like white miners and white farmers who are like, I don't want a person to bring enslaved people here.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have to compete against that. And I can't literally compete against someone who will do labor for free because they have to.
Yeah.
But like, it's not a big enough issue for me to vote on.
Yeah.
If that sounds familiar to anybody, they split in 1860. They're not able to agree on a candidate. And so the Northern Democrats run one candidate.
Okay.
His name's Douglas.
Oh.
And in speech and debate, we get the word
Lincoln Douglas from this?
Well, actually, what's so funny, we get the word Lincoln Douglas from the Illinois Senate election in which Lincoln and Douglas debated the issue of slavery over again.
Fuck up.
And Illinois elected Douglas. And then Lincoln was like, well, I lost, but a lot of people know who I am. And Republicans are like, we got no one else. You get up there.
Lincoln Douglas is a style of debate, by the way, that's like very dependent on morality for some reason and values. I truly don't get it. Like,
sometimes I have to remember I'm not doing this podcast just for you.
Yeah.
They nominate someone. The Southerners nominate someone else. I think his last name is Breckinridge, but don't quote me on that. There's so many names in the story. And shocking no one. It splits the vote.
What?
The Democrats can't unify around a candidate. Democratic candidates probably could have won enough states if they had set on one candidate. They don't. Lincoln wins instead with like, by the way, he's considered America's like greatest president now. Lincoln wins the election of 1860 with like 45% of the vote. It's not wild. A majority. It's not really even close to a majority.
Right.
And the South sets itself on fire.
I'm going to set myself on fire.
No, for reals. Between Lincoln winning the election in November and being inaugurated in the spring, South Carolina secedes from the Union.
That's so dramatic.
South Carolina doesn't wait for Lincoln to be president. South Carolina secedes before he is sworn in.
Well,
I don't mean to be so pejorative towards the South, because there's lots of people I love who live there or who are from there.
And there's a lot of great places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Politically, so dramatic.
Questionable. Very questionable.
Like, just truly, like, Lincoln probably was not going to allow the expansion of slavery into territories if he had the votes in Congress to do it. Lincoln had no plans to end slavery in places like Mississippi and Georgia. But Southern secessionists give abolitionists ultimately the world's greatest gift. Abolitionists couldn't explain to you how you end slavery without violence. And the South is like, well, we'll start the violence. What if we did it? What if we were just immediately out of our minds violent to preserve a deeply violent system?
Violence solves violence, right?
Okay. So much like it was in 1776, much like it was in 1824, much like it was in every single election, the election of 1860 comes down to the issue of enslavement. Right. The South sets itself on fire. It leaves the country completely. That's the election of 1860. 1864 rolls around. The South is actively not part of the country. We host an election anyways. Lincoln obviously wins. Lincoln puts, however, on his ticket a Southern Democrat
to try
who had remained faithful to the Union.
Right.
They actually call the 1864 ticket the Union ticket. But since President Lincoln was the head of the ticket, it's considered a Republican win.
Right.
The third party system starts with the election of 1860. And here's what the third party system is going to look like. All of these people are members of the same political party.
It's crazy to me that the party that we currently associate with the South is the party that was like, I'm going to leave. And now that party is like, well, if you don't like it, then leave.
Correct. And if you think that's ironic, I can't wait to tell you something later on in this episode.
Okay.
Okay. So 1860, Lincoln wins. He's a Republican. 1864, Lincoln wins. He's a Republican. He's assassinated pretty quickly into it.
Yeah.
Andrew Johnson takes over.
Right.
Technically a Democrat, but the Republicans have such a supermajority in Congress, they're basically doing whatever they want.
Right.
68, Grant wins. Like Ulysses S. Grant, the former president. Like me. Ulysses S. Grant wins. Like the former president. He's a Republican. 1872, Grant wins re-election. He's a Republican. 1876, Rutherford B. Hayes wins. He's a Republican.
Right.
1880, Garfield wins. He's a Republican.
Wow. 7
Republicans in a row win in a period we know as the Civil War and the Reconstruction era.
Oh, my God.
We are currently in the third party system, so we now need to have a new main character.
Yes.
New main character.
Da, 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 da.
President Rutherford B. Hayes. Hey. Okay,
God.
so let's talk about America's worst president.
Oh, no. I had a lot of thoughts, and then I kept them all to myself. So, and
Do you want to share any of them
no,
now?
now they're gone.
Okay. As soon as we get closer to modern day politics, you'll have even more to say.
Oh, probably.
1860, Civil War starts. Civil War ends in 1865. Johnson is at this point president, but Republicans are running the country.
Right.
That's why it's important that Ulysses S. Grant wins the next two elections, 68 and 72, because he's a Republican. He's a Republican that fought and kicked the ass of the Confederacy, absolutely crushed them under the heel of Northern supremacy. Don't forget the only tradition the Southerners have is surrender and enslavement.
We have the Republicans in the North, and then there's a differentiation. Are they also called Republicans?
There's Republicans in the North.
Yes.
And there's Democrats in the South.
Right.
And there are a couple of non-enslaving Democrats in the Midwest and increasingly the West, but it's largely the Republican Party.
Okay, cool.
After the Civil War, we enter a period known as Reconstruction.
Right.
We kicked the ass of the Confederacy, who never had a shot in hell of winning, never was going to happen. It's embarrassing they tried. They killed 3 million Americans for something truly evil. There is nothing good about the Confederacy at all whatsoever. Their president had to flee dressed in women's clothing, which was a huge embarrassment in 1864 and 1865 because he was a coward who betrayed his country, who he had sworn an oath to. We then enter a period of Reconstruction because we had managed to successfully burn down much of the South because they deserved it. They did. That period of Reconstruction was marked specifically by troops of our national government occupying southern states. That's a really important element to know about Reconstruction. Reconstruction makes it sound like, oh, we like rebuilt their state houses and like provided loans to like rebuild like industry and things like that. No, Reconstruction by and large was after we won the Civil War, using the army to make sure that the South treated black people better than they did before.
Which
not
is
even
not
saying
saying
equal.
much. Yeah.
No. And let's not act like the federal government preserved all of its promises.
No. Yeah.
Kendrick Lamar's 40 Acre and a Mule reference is because after the war, we kind of promised enslaved black Americans that we would give them 40 acres to farm and a mule, which at that time was kind of like your tractor.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's what you did your farm work on. And what you see during Reconstruction, especially under Grant's terms, is a flourishing of black political power in the South. Mississippi and South Carolina have majority black populations right afterwards.
Yeah.
Those majority black populations were given the right to vote during Reconstruction. And because of federal troops stationed in the South, we call them federal troops, national troops, stationed in the South, were able to vote. And so you have a black governor of Mississippi. You have black majority legislatures in a couple of these states.
Okay.
You have black elected U.S. senators who get sent to Washington, D.C.
I feel like this isn't talked about enough.
No, it's not.
It's never
mentioned. And that's
mentioned.
actually a concerted effort by white Southerners to erase this portion of history.
Yeah.
There's this flourishing of black political power. In some places, like black Republican representation is about to take hold. And then the election of Rutherford B. Hayes happens. It would be, 60, 64, 68, 72. The election of 1876 occurs.
Okay.
Rutherford B. Hayes represents the Republican ticket. Some no-name nobody represents the Democratic ticket. But it gets really, really, really close. And it has to go to the House of Representatives again.
Oh, my gosh.
And they strike a deal.
Oh, Jesus.
The South will support Rutherford B. Hayes, and he will become president. And in exchange, Rutherford B. Hayes will pull federal troops from the
out
South.
Of the South.
And as soon as he does, the Ku Klux Klan emerges.
Oh, my God.
Lynchings begin immediately. And elections go from fair, contested elections in the South to a white supermajority that used political terrorism and violence to prevent black Americans from voting for the next 100 years.
Preventing them from voting?
1876 is the election of Rutherford B. Hayes. You don't see the Voting Rights Act pass until like 1967.
Wow. Shit. Okay.
Yeah. Do you know what Rutherford B. Hayes accomplished? Fucking nothing.
Yeah.
They gave away 100 years of civic involvement. And also, realistically, America's last chance to fix the original sin that we committed.
Because that was the only chance to handle the like systematic issues.
Correct. And while I'm a believer in Hope Corps, I'm a believer in the future. I believe things can always be improved and better, and we can educate and we can grow as both people and as communities. The South had been torn down because of their treason, and we were morally mandated to lift up Black Americans.
Right.
There was an equality there that just hadn't existed, and Black American political power was protected by the military force of the North, and they were flourishing and they were doing better. And then we took it away for a man who served one term.
And isn't there like the 40 acres and a mule promise didn't get fulfilled, right?
Correct.
Why was that?
Bunch of different reasons. Political reality. Up north, there was some like discontent around keeping federal troops stationed down there. They wanted the whole Civil War thing to end. They wanted to put it all behind them.
Right.
What do I owe a Black American? I'm struggling. Do I really need to help them at all? Right? Like all of these issues that we see kind of still political thinking today. It just doesn't happen. And then without Grant there to help enforce this, Grant, who is personally aware of the absolute depravity of humanity that the South possessed at the time, who was going to hold the political fires to it all?
Yeah.
So it crumbles. And at the end of this period, that crumbling of support of Black people in the South ends this third party system.
Okay. Oof.
But also, North and South Dakota get admitted to the Union during this time.
Okay.
Wyoming gets admitted to the Union during this time. Colorado gets admitted to the Union during this time. A bunch of very small states get admitted to the Union at this time. And if you have ever asked yourself, why is it North Dakota and South Dakota? And why isn't it not just Dakota?
Because there isn't enough people, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they're so small.
Yeah.
It's the issue of slavery. During Reconstruction, national Republican leaders wanted to make sure slave states never shared equal political power as free states.
Oh, so they divided it.
Intentionally created as many northern and midwestern states as possible that had never experienced slavery.
Damn.
I know, right? Little
That's
fact drop
crazy.
for you. North and South Dakota exist largely as a backstop against the power of slave states.
It's crazy because if it were just Dakota, that's a huge state.
Yeah. The Republicans lose just one vote in the U.S. House, but loses 2 votes in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
Which is the entire majority right now. Now imagine if we had just lumped together like Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming.
That's true, yeah.
Also states that had very small populations at the time.
Could have been one.
Correct. If we had lumped all of them together.
Interesting.
Right. But there's at the moment, a political issue at hand, and their creation helps solve it. It unbalances the power in a way that's really important. What they can't foresee at the time when these states are coming into the Union is that these states are going to clump together to form their own political identity that is separate from the South, but is also separate from the North.
Okay.
It's like, you're not going to be able to control them, babes.
Yeah.
That's what autonomy is all about, you know? And so this whole system ends.
They're literally toddlers.
Correct.
Yeah.
Rutherford B. Hayes ends Reconstruction. Surprising,
Wow.
no one.
Yeah.
Republicans don't win really any support in the South in the next election. However, you still have the election of, I think it's Garfield. And then Grover Cleveland wins the election of like 1888 or whatever, loses it in 1892, wins it again in, I have the years off a little bit, wins it again for 2 non-consecutive terms. He's term limited out. And then in 1896, William McKinley of Ohio gets elected president. And it's the start of the third political system.
Oh my God.
Okay.
That's crazy.
Do we have any questions about the...
Maybe.
Okay.
I have a fun fact, though. Colorado's called the Centennial State because we were officially given statehood exactly 100 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed.
So what year was that?
1876.
Very good. Yes.
And the garage door code to my college house was 1874 because my college of mines was became an official university 2 years before Colorado became a state.
I love shit like that.
Yeah.
Okay. We are now going to start talking about 1896, the fourth party system. We're going to talk about Theodore Roosevelt a little bit, who we just met.
Yeah.
We're going to start to get to history that you guys really know. But we've kind of covered the political history so far. I'm out of whiskey, so we'll be right back.
Excellent.
But hopefully you're enjoying this so far. If not, we're halfway through.
You're almost done.
Yeah, no, really. Okay, so we have moved through so far 3 different party systems in the United States in our story. First party system, which was right after the revolution. Second party system, which was kind of the emergence of a political system that we would recognize, Democratic Republicans versus Federalists.
Right.
And then this third party system of Democrats versus Whigs.
Right.
And sorry, I got that wrrong. This
because that's first and second.
right,
Yeah,
correct. This third party system of Democrats versus Republicans, where Republicans are dominant.
But it's flipped from today's understanding of Democrats and Republicans.
What I think we are starting to see as a trend emerge as we move through these histories is that each party system ends because it refused to address the issues that needed to be addressed, right? So the first party system emerges because of our issues with governance during British rule. Right. And then we needed to figure out, well, what were the parameters of our federal system? That ends. The second system begins of America as this world power, which we had kind of stepped into as we were solving these other issues.
Right.
That then ends as the issue of slavery finally forces itself because of the enslavers onto the national population.
Right.
And that starts the third party system. And that third party system is then dominated by the political party that has an answer to it, which is the Republicans.
Yeah.
But then during the latter half of this third party system, issues are emerging that they're not addressing. And these issues are emerging and giving their opposition the opportunity to attack, right?
Right.
Those issues are, and stop me if any of these sound familiar.
Stop.
Extreme economic inequality.
Stop.
A revitalized labor movement.
Stop. It's reading like a 1920s newspaper heading.
A larger growing divide between rural and urban communities.
Stop.
Immigration.
Yeah. Okay.
So in 1896, issues from the period we would call the Gilded Age of America forces their way onto the national politics. And William McKinley becomes president in 96. He's reelected in 1990, immediately pew-pewed in Buffalo, New York by an assassin. Teddy Roosevelt comes in. And even though he's the same political party as McKinley, he's incredibly progressive. He is anti-corrupt. He is a big supporter of a strong foreign policy, but he's also preserving national parks at home. You're seeing social movements kind of take off underneath him. Taft, his hand-picked successor, will continue those and then serve one term and will lose. You'll get your only Democrat during this time, Woodrow Wilson, who wins largely because Roosevelt runs against his hand-picked successor and then has the power of incumbency in 1816. And also in 1816, Woodrow Wilson's like, I kept us out of World War I. And America's like, you're right, I'm going to vote for you. And he goes, thank you. I now intend to launch us into World War I. It's more nuanced.
World War I.
As everything is more nuanced than that, but that's also a funny headline. And then Wilson's the only non-Republican elected during this time.
Wow.
Because then he's elected in 1916, he leaves office in 1920, and then you have 8 years of Republican rule.
Oof.
Yep, correct. Harding, Hoover. And then this period will end in 1928.
This is not J. Edgar Hoover.
No.
Okay.
It's Herbert Hoover.
Okay, that's right. I couldn't remember his name.
Hoover Dam fame.
Yeah.
So the political issues that kind of force the start of this fourth party system are the fact that the country in 1900 is almost unrecognizably different than the country of 1860.
Right.
So the country of 1860 that starts the third party system with Lincoln and it's Republicans versus Democrats, it's still kind of, it's still very young. And because it's still very young, it's kind of old, right? Like places out, quote, west, like Kentucky and Tennessee and Missouri and Iowa and Arkansas are stepping into their political power a little bit. Texas has been brought into the Union, but is kind of so far off
that people don't feel like they belong. Yeah.
Oil isn't a huge issue, so it's mainly like a cattle farm, right?
That's a crazy.
No, I know, but like it is.
No,
you know? And then by the time you get to 1900, 20 million immigrants have entered this country.
Right.
They are immigrating to everywhere not labeled the South. And it's going to politically transform this country, because what does this do? It ends up supercharging a couple of places where the Democrats are able to win.
Right.
Republicans still maintain control, but these elections become competitive.
Is this still the Republicans in the North?
Republicans in the North, Democrats are in the South.
Okay.
Oh, and our main character, for the fourth party system are my Aunt Shirley and Aunt Carol.
Oh, I love that.
We'll talk about it. Okay, so Democrats have been able to win the White House for the first time since before the Civil War. That's Grover Cleveland, 2 non-consecutive terms. The political calculations are now completely thrown into the wind because these things that emerged at the end of the third party system are now going to define the fourth party system.
Okay.
Extreme wealth inequality, which is then trying to be combated by labor movements, right?
Yeah.
You're starting to see a very large growing rural-urban divide because of immigration. And really, this country changes because we add 20 million non-Americans into America who then become Americans.
Okay.
It is in the fourth party system that we see the defining of what we would call the American dream. And that's what I think is actually really interesting about the fourth party system. The fourth party system sees such a massive influx of immigrants into this country that these people look at a country that at this point is 125 years old.
Yeah.
Is older than any of them living.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is a brand new country.
Yeah.
This country is not done. And there is this real sense, both from immigrants and people born in America, that they are actively building America. It's during your lifetime, new states are being added, right?
Right, yeah.
Towns are being founded. Wealth is being made. You have an invention, you can strike it rich, right?
Is this during the Industrial Revolution?
Yes. So that started kind of around the Civil War for America, maybe a little bit before, a little bit after.
Yeah.
But like Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, for example, that's what this era is, right?
Okay.
It's in New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago. Massive overcrowding as immigrants flood in. But it's also in places like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Scandinavians like Norwegians, Finns, and Swedes moving in and starting dairy farms. The cheese episode that I did, they're bringing like that knowledge with them. In the larger Great Plains states, you see people from the Netherlands and Germany settling, and they're starting farms, right? The reason why my Aunt Carol and Shirley are the main characters of this episode is because you start to see a very recognizable pattern that didn't really exist before the fourth party system, but is now almost celebrated. The first generation of Americans, the first generation of immigrants will speak their home language.
Right.
Their children, the second generation, will be bilingual. And my Aunt Carol and Aunt Shirley, who were born in the 1940s and 50s, will speak German as their first language and learn English at school. And will lose it when they go off to college and are like fully integrated in the 60s and 70s. But that tradition in a lot of these communities will last very, very, very long. Right.
Including me.
Yes. Yeah.
I knew Japanese as a child, and then I forgot it so early on that my mom actually didn't believe that I used to be able to speak Japanese until we went to Japan and like met with some of like my childhood friends and her mom, and they told my mom in Japanese so I couldn't understand. That was like, so she still they were like trying to talk to me, and I like couldn't quite understand what they were saying, and they like turned to my mom and were like, "What happened?"
Right.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing for you is that your mom was basically the only person in your life who spoke Japanese. The thing about American immigrants at this time is that
They have
the
communities.
exact opposite. It's so funny. This time period has seen like 200 people moved from this town in Germany to this town in like Nebraska, my hometown, for example. So their arrival here represented extreme movement, and then their life represented extreme non-movement.
Right.
Like you were born, lived, had children, died in that county.
Right.
And so these language traditions continued for a really long time. And because these language traditions continued, you have these community traditions continuing, and that means you have these community mindsets continuing.
Is this where we get like Dutch or Pennsylvania Dutch?
Yes.
Okay.
And also like the Dutch communities of Northwest Iowa vote very, very, very differently than some of the German communities of Southwest Wisconsin, even though they are geographically speaking in America,
Like right next to
very
each other,
close,
yeah.
very, very different. Southwest Wisconsin like voted for Tammy Baldwin for the U.S. Senate. Northeast Iowa is considered the most conservative corner of Iowa, right? Like,
Oh my gosh,
so these
yeah.
today, that's in
Yeah.
2020, 2024, right? Like Tammy Baldwin's a Democrat, if the context
Yeah,
in it
yeah.
makes sense. Like, they come over, they bring their traditions with them, they bring their communities with them, and that stays a part of this community's identity as part of how they see the world. And that becomes very clear in the political process. So
Right.
you have in the North and South, still largely defined by the political systems that have existed since they were founded, right? Republicans are in the North, Democrats are in the South. Out West, it's a fucking free-for-all. Parties are
Classic,
emerging.
yeah.
Like the Progressive Party, the Populist Party, the Socialist Party takes over in a couple of places. Communism exists
Yeah.
for a day, then we snuff it out. Yeah. We're like, bing, bang,
AKA
boom.
the entire 60s.
No, correct.
Yeah.
And this political party system, the North's going to vote for the Republican. The South is going to vote for the Democratic candidate.
Right.
The winner of the White House will be decided in the Midwest and the West, which is going to vote largely for Republicans, but in
Okay.
Woodrow Wilson's case, will vote for the Democrats, right?
Okay.
And while that's happening at the national level, it's almost like national politics is detached and removed from what's happening at the local political level.
Right.
Because there are things that you appreciate, Maya, listener, that you appreciate today that come from the progressive movement or the populist movement of this time. Because the people that started these traditions viewed America as an unfinished project.
Right.
And were working to move it forward. It's during this time public schools become ubiquitous.
Right.
It's during this time you see a lot of religious universities founded that are like educating women, are worried about, are you a good member of our community?
Right.
Do you remember in 2014 when the state of Colorado legalized marijuana?
Boy, do I.
Do you remember how it ended up on the ballot?
No, I have no
A
idea.
bunch of people circulated a petition to get it on the ballot.
Oh, yeah.
And the entire state of Colorado voted on whether or not they should legalize marijuana or not. Start to finish, that entire process is from this era of political mobilization.
Wow.
There was this idea that as many decisions as we can put in front of the people, we
Put in
should.
front of them, yeah.
So at any time you answer a ballot initiative these days,
Yeah.
it's from this political
Okay.
era. Do you know who our current U.S. senators for the state of Colorado is?
Michael, I don't know if they're
Bennett
senators.
and John
yeah.
Hickenlooper.
Yeah.
And we had an election, I believe, in 2022 for them.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe it was 2024. I just always vote, you know. Here's the thing. Our ability to vote for U.S. senators
Right.
from this era of political activism.
Shit, okay.
You would vote for your state legislative candidate.
Oh,
You would
because they
vote-
used to be appointed.
Correct. You would vote for the state legislative candidate.
Okay.
The state legislature would then decide U.S. senators. You would vote for your member of the House of Representatives and your member of the state house, and then your U.S. senator decided by backdoor dealings. That's changing during this entire time.
Okay. To dumb that down
Yep.
for people who
Yes.
who
I'm going to take a sip. You please go.
who are like not in the United States or maybe not familiar. What he's saying is that today we have two branches of we call it Congress, right? And then it's the House and the Senate.
Senate.
Yeah, so there's two branches of Congress, the House and the Senate. The Senate has a set number of representatives per state. It's like two two for every single state,
Correct.
regardless of population. And then the House is population-based, so different states get different numbers of representatives, and it's more representative of the population as a whole. What he's saying is that we used to be able to vote for the House and our state legislature. So like one reaching to federal and one reaching to state. And then the state legislature that we would vote for would then appoint that other branch of Congress, the Senate, which only has 2 representatives per state.
Which that transaction was rife for corruption.
Yes. Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, you could pay anybody out.
Right. So that whole process ends. In rural communities, you have people voting for like public works projects. Right.
Right.
And I don't necessarily even mean electricity. That'll come later. But just like in general, rural communities are like, no white person has ever lived here before. The people that did live here, we have forcibly removed. We need help making this a livable space. We need the help of our neighbors, the help of our state, the help of our federal government. So you see them voting for things that are absolutely progressive in our mind's eye today.
Right.
The state of North Dakota has a state bank, for example. It's the only state in the country. The state of Nebraska has a state-owned power grid because of these progressive movements.
Okay.
That's what's happening in our rural communities. In our urban communities, in places like Chicago, for example, you have like the social welfare movement in America taking off for the first time. People saying crazy things like, I don't think orphans should die. I don't think orphans should have to work in factories and then die.
What?
I don't think orphans should starve and then die. Like I think we should take care of orphans. And also like all of these women are getting literally beat up at home. I think that's bad. I think we should do something about it. I think we should actually move to like make Americans' soul better through like a social welfare movement. And it's from these initial seeds that you're going to get prohibition coming from. But all of this is fueled by immigration and extreme wealth inequality. It's like everyone's fine if we're all poor, but if I'm poor and dying and you're literally super duper rich that you could buy a country, I don't want to work for you. I don't want to go to there. I want to
really
change
don't.
that. And this is being powered by immigrants who are coming to this country with no connection to the political systems before, who are here to make a better life for their family, and who are here because they don't view America as finished, who view this as a blank slate.
Yeah.
So if it's a blank slate for me economically, why would it be a set in stone political system? I'm going to vote for whoever the fuck I want.
Yeah.
And also, I'm trying to survive. So when I'm an Irish laundry worker in a tenement building in New York City, and a Irish man knocks on my door and says, you know, hey, love, or whatever. I'm not going to try to do an offensive Irish accent. On election day, you need to vote for Irish McIrish face, right?
Yeah.
For city police detective or whatever.
Right.
And I go, I don't know.
I don't know, so no.
And they go, here's $1. I go, Irish McIrish face, police detective, gotcha, right? And political systems emerge, political machines emerge, and everyone today is like, oh, political machines are so bad, like corruption, oh, that's bad. No. Like this entire episode is to get you to think differently about our political system. By and large, urban and rural areas vote ubiquitously already still today, but the people who vote for them don't get any benefit. Okay. Do you know what was really nice about machines? They'd be like, you will give us a clean water drinking system, or we will have 100,000 people vote for your political opposition. And do you know what they fucking got? A clean water drinking system, right? By dissolving our political power down to the individual, we have robbed ourselves of the ability to hold our publicly elected officials hostage.
Grant is like, so the mob. Anyone?
No, it's like it's good if it's bad. You know, it's good if it's
no,
bad.
it has its pros that are not often considered.
Correct. Like, here's an example that's going to be kind of out of the box for you. Imagine a political leader in the city of Dallas going to U.S. Republican Senator John Cornyn and saying something like, you will ban assault weapons or we'll cast 3 million votes against you. We had voted for you in the last election, and in the last election you won by 2 million votes. You can go ahead and make that decision as to what you want. And politicians did and sometimes won in their campaigns against political machines, right?
Yeah.
If they felt truly vindicated by their stance. Not always. You think labor laws were super popular amongst like political ruling class that was making money off of children being just torn up by a machine? Of course it wasn't.
No.
Like, there are things we appreciate today that came from blackmail.
Yeah. Like Frank Sinatra.
Right. And that's kind of the benefit of a two-party political system.
Mm-hmm.
There is always an alternative that I can vote for. And we need to hold our vote hostage more.
I agree.
There's listen, put the emo down. There's always examples where that's not true. But you know what I'm saying. So the issue of immigration completely reshapes everything. And these communities hold these identities.
Does the issue of immigration ever not change everything?
No.
Yeah, okay. Cool.
But do you know
Glad
what
we're still
also
trying to work that one out.
doesn't change? The issue of slavery in America. Because do you know where these immigrants aren't moving to? The South.
Yeah.
And they're not moving to South because in the North and in the Midwest, you have a demand for more workers. In the North, we need people to work in factories. There's great industrial cities emerging. Also in certain places in the Midwest, like Cleveland and Chicago. So we need workers there to literally operate the machinery of these expanding industries. In the Midwest, we have land that we have just forcibly removed indigenous people from that we now want to turn into what we would consider productive agricultural land. I need bodies there who will then farm that land. And so these two regions not only are like pro-immigrant, but are so aggressively pro-immigrant. We're like, please come here. In the American South, the families that had enslaved black people in 1860 are now paying black people poverty wages to be what we would call sharecroppers, where they farm the land of their ancestors, give the majority of their earnings to the ancestors of the people that enslaved their ancestors, who are still victims of political violence because the political system is still ran by the people that have always ran the political system. They are not viewed as political entities. They are barred from voting. They can be murdered, and the murderers are let go for free. And because they are kept so impoverished, have no ability to move out of the South. But because that whole system exists, there's two pressures on the Southern economy. First, no one can outcompete essentially forced labor of black Americans. And second, white Southerners have no economic incentive to come up with new ways to make money.
So again, to break that down a little bit, the black Americans who, like, after the Civil War, after Reconstruction, are now not considered slaves, a lot of them try to leave or want to leave, but because they have no money and no like assets or anything like that, can't. And so they end up staying on their current plantations and working for the same people that their ancestors worked for with like a minimal wage. But then out of that wage, their ancestors' owners essentially are charging a fee. So they only get to keep a portion of their already tiny wages. And then on top of that, you have like a whole political and social structure that's keeping them from voting, even though legally, technically, they have the right to vote.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Perfectly said.
Okay.
Wish I had said it that way. Truly, like, well done. 5 out of 5 stars. I would have given you full credit in class.
Wow.
Yeah, no, that was really good.
That's it. I can quit.
But please don't, because that means the whole podcast stops. But that means immigrants aren't arriving in the South. And immigrants are people. And we need to remember that. Immigrants are just people. They're not some like Greek goddess of wisdom and humility and all of that jazz. They're not the scum of the earth and violent criminals. They're people.
They came here to, honestly, to work, to make better lives for their family.
And so the fact that immigrants aren't going to the South, except for like Atlanta and a handful of other places, but like by and large are not going to the South, means that the South does not get this infusion of new political energy and perspective that others do, which is why you see places like New York and Iowa and Wisconsin and Indiana vote for different political parties over and over again, and why you see Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia vote for the exact same presidential candidate basically every single election.
Except for 2020.
Right, say for like one or two examples. And so this whole system sees growing discontent, people concerned about a whole bunch of stuff. Issues are being resolved, but not enough.
Right.
Because economy good and money fun. And Rockefeller invited me to a party one time.
I mean, same.
So why on earth would I ever get in his way? And they keep paying us being the Republican Party of the 1920s. So why would I ever try to regulate them? That's not the purpose of government. The purpose of government is to be corrupt lapdog of wealthy Americans, and black Americans suffering is sad, but like I make money. So why do I care?
Oh my
And
God.
also important, like all of these Republican presidents are from like northern states.
Yeah.
And so in 1928, Herbert Hoover wins the presidential election
Right.
with almost 60% of the national vote.
Okay.
And what's extra impressive is he wins almost 60% of the national vote, and black Americans in the South can't vote, and black Americans in the South would be voting Republican if they were allowed to vote.
Oh, so they would have voted for Hoover.
And do you remember what happens after 1928?
Great Depress, I think.
Maya, real quick, right now, in front of everyone,
yes.
internationally syndicated audience,
Yes.
what were the main causes of the Great Depression? I want to know. I want to point out, I would struggle to answer that question.
There's something about the Lehman Brothers, I think.
Yo, so you saw one play
I
with
saw
me
one play.
as two 14-year-olds made up behind me, and I kept yelling at them, and now you're an expert on the Great Depression.
Yeah. Obviously. No,
Yeah.
I truly can't. It had something to do with confidence in the markets, right? Maybe? I don't know.
Sure.
Dude, finance is fucking astrology for boys.
Correct.
That shit, I told.
That's not true. The worst woman you've ever met is also in finance.
That's true. I had this conversation with Aileen where she like was talking about some marketing strategy. Side note, holy fucking shit. We had our like weekly while I left marketing call, whatever or today. She has a friend named Sam who is dating a Sam.
I have had that before.
This is why we brought it up, because
okay.
I mentioned yours.
I'm a little drunk.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
She said that they met because they were on a basketball team together. And Aileen, the Sam that she knew originally, Aileen made a Hinge profile for their basketball team.
Their entire basketball team?
And said, show up to this bar and then come watch our basketball game. And 2 people showed up, one of which being Sam, the second Sam.
So I need to know 4 other gay people, and then we can launch a Hinge profile.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Right?
Also, and I'm going to be so light on details here, but the story that Aileen told you about those 2 people, I think about it every day. Not like at the same time every day, but, and this is why I think Miss Universe is real. At some point during every day, the universe puts on my heart that story. And I'm so grateful for it.
Aileen, I'm leaving this in just for you because I told her that I told you this story.
Good.
And she's having a pride party this weekend. And she was talking about how she's trying to get those 2 people to come for the bit.
In. Oh shit, I have work. I would otherwise fly in. I'm not even joking. Like it just, and I love saying shit like I'm some Southern or like Midwestern Christian
God
mom.
bless her.
Puts it on my heart. Puts it on my heart. And I think about it every day.
And listener, I would love to tell you literally any detail, but I can't for legal reasons. Anyway, we were talking about marketing, and I was like, marketing feels like astrology. Like A plus B equals C in science, but in marketing, A plus B equals C if the sun is in the northwesterly quadrant of the sky and the sun's hitting you just right, and there's a frog 5 feet from your doorstep, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree completely.
So anyway, finance is also astrology, and thus I don't know how the Great Depression happened. Back to the original point, listener.
Perfect Sagoo.
Yeah.
The short answer is some investments went bad.
Right.
There's a run on the banks by the average American, which undermines our financial institutions. This kind of is creating ripple effects across the world. This is happening in a couple of different places. Countries become really protective with their economies through tariffs, and that slows down the flow of capital between countries, which then slows down the flow of goods, which is then bad for everyone's economy.
Right.
And it kind of spirals into something awful, and it kind of spirals into a thing where you like really struggled to get ahead of until it's just finally ran itself out.
Right.
And the Great Depression happens.
Nice.
And it begins the new party system. The fifth party system begins.
Classic.
Yes. They had kind of addressed some of the political issues that had started the fourth party system.
Right.
The progressive era movement did that. There's some legitimate third party candidates. Oh, there's actually some really cool historical stuff. Sorry.
He forgot he had notes, listener. If you're not on video, he literally, you can see in his eyes, he remembered he had a phone with notes on them. He was just fucking
No, there's
vamping.
over 3,000 words written for today's episode. It's not even a bullet point kind of. It's like fully written out. I missed the gym today.
Yeah.
Like it's fully. Hold on, let me find it. Okay.
He wrote all of this down and then just click off, put face down on the table.
No, I got the first 2/3 of this section so good. It's just this final third. It's the fun fact section.
Okay.
I'm missing. Okay. Fun fact. Turns out 1920, the election, Democrats lose.
Okay.
That includes their vice presidential candidate, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Oh.
I didn't know that. I
That's
didn't know he'd
wild.
failed to win the vice presidency. Ugh. In 1920.
Wow. Yeah.
Other fun facts. In 1912 and 1924, a third party, the Progressive Party, wins at least one state's electoral votes.
Seriously?
Correct.
Holy
it's
shit.
the only time in American history a political party not dedicated to segregation has won political votes.
Either pro or con.
Oh, no, pro-segregation. Very much pro-segregation. The only time America has seen a third party win electoral votes at the presidential level whose entire ticket isn't just racism. 1912, it's because Theodore Roosevelt's like, okay, I'll run again. No one's asking me.
Yeah.
And several people are asking me not to.
And Alice is in the background screaming, Daddy left me!
Daddy left me! And I loved being in the White House.
Yeah. Take me back.
Right, no, for reals.
Yeah.
And then in 1912, progressives are winning electoral votes elsewhere, but there's a fourth political party.
Oh my God.
Headed by Eugene Debs, the literal Socialist Party of America. Eugene Debs wins over 1 million votes.
Bring it back.
I'm going to give you, don't actually guess 5 times, but
No.
I could give you 50 votes and you would not remember.
50 votes?
You would never guess where Eugene Debs is from. Give me one guess.
Wyoming.
Indiana.
Shut the fuck up.
I know, the most fucking NPC state. I'm swearing a lot now. The most NPC, middle of the road, beige state to ever exist. No,
we love all of you that live there.
If you live in Indiana, I get it. I too have felt the constraints of a Midwestern existence. What it's done for this country, I don't know. I mean, it's done a beautiful job of connecting Illinois and Ohio, and that's something. And then you have Michigan, kind of. And who can forget about Pete Buttigieg? He's famously gay in the same way Neil Patrick Harris is. And I once was warned by a gas station attendant about an old gypsy woman in West Indiana.
Jesus Christ.
I've told you that story.
Just say slurs on our podcast now.
She said, if you see the old gypsy woman, tell her Clara is coming for her.
You're right. If she
I'm
jumped off a
still
bridge, you would.
single.
Clara.
These are stories I've told you
I know
in
you
private.
I know. I want you to know how bad I am with U.S. geography. Is you said
It connects Illinois and Ohio.
and it's Indiana.
Yes.
Right?
Right? Yeah, go ahead.
There's so many I states that I genuinely do not know the difference. I love you all. I love you all. But like, if you'll notice the statement I made right after Grant said Indiana, I did not specify a state because my brain went Illinois.
We love you all.
If you're in an I state, you're all in the same. I don't even care if you're in Idaho. It is kind of the
It's
same.
just Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana.
I know, and they're all kind of same but very different.
Except,
and
of course, for Idaho.
Yeah, kind of. Like I know that Idaho's different, but sometimes I think it grows potate, which it does.
It does.
But which then in my head, Midwest.
Okay, so we're going to get back to it. Eugene Debs was from Indiana, and he won 1 million votes for the Socialist
Somehow
Party.
I insulted Grant. I don't know how. I can feel it.
Like,
though.
I don't want to claim Indiana, but like, there she is. There she blows. Okay, so 1928, Herbert Hoover wins almost 60% of the national vote.
That's crazy.
Everyone's like, Republicans are doing such a good job. It's crazy.
Which is Democrats today, if you're still lost.
No, actually.
No, really? When
No.
did that happen?
Well, okay.
Because people are always like, in the past, the morality or ethics of the two parties are reversed.
I'm loving the way the whiskey's treating us right now.
I know. So, like,
too.
when the fuck did that switch happen?
Right. Okay. So the switch that you are referring to largely happens between 1968 and 1980 through the Nixon strategy that they call the Southern Strategy.
Okay.
That's when the two regions truly start to vote differently.
Yeah. Okay.
But Republicans are winning the North and Midwest at the time in 1928.
Okay.
But their political philosophy is largely deregulate everything, bomb everyone. No, I'm kidding. Deregulate everything. We should have colonies. Let's go ahead and make more money, right? Because the fifth party system is going to, at its roots, rip up Americans' political system, shred it, confetti in the air, and completely realign American political identity.
So what I'm going to now internalize is that the fifth political party system is when that switch happened in my head.
You're not wrong.
Okay. Like, it's probably started happening earlier.
No.
Okay.
The fifth party system, so when I say you're not wrong, I mean you're right.
Okay.
Defining the end of the fifth party system is hard because we're now getting so close to modern day.
Yeah.
So for non-Americans or for Americans who were failed by a bad education system in your hometown.
Well, just not me being interested in history.
1928, Herbert Hoover wins the presidency.
Right.
It's his first term. Ironically, Herbert Hoover is kind of starting to move towards some of these progressive policies.
And he's Republican?
Correct.
Right.
As the financial data and economic data becomes worse and worse.
Okay.
Like, for instance, he approves this massive public works project in the state of Nevada.
Okay.
It's going to be this giant dam that blocks a lot of water and generates a lot of electricity.
The Hoover Dam.
Known as the Hoover Dam.
Wow.
But he's going to lose re-election in 1932 to Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Okay.
And FDR is going to be a petty ass bitch.
Love that for him.
Super mad about the state of the country that he inherits from Hoover.
Okay.
So, and here's something fun, because FDR obviously is going to get a pretty good reputation on this podcast.
Right.
FDR wins the presidency while president, like the dam is finished, and renames the Hoover Dam the Boulder Dam.
Goodbye.
And Dwight D. Eisenhower, I'm almost positive, renames it back to the Hoover Dam. And that's how we know it. But he's so mad at the way things are when he inherits it from Hoover that he takes his name off like the one thing Herbert Hoover did.
You hear that, Gulf of Mexico? There's still time.
We're coming for you.
You will become the Gulf of Mexico again.
Listen. Gift shops in Galveston. Don't change that order. Keep those shot glasses labeled Gulf of Mexico.
The way that any merch or any like atlas or anything that says Gulf of America is going to be a collector's item in 100 years.
Hopefully
wild.
In 3.5.
Yeah, please, dear God.
My God. So the election of 1932 happens, and again, the winning party wins almost 60% of the national vote, but it's the Democrats this time. You see a massive, unprecedented swing in the national vote towards the Democrats.
Okay.
Because here's actually a little fun fact about American politics.
This whole episode.
I know.
Yeah.
Almost all of these elections that I've talked about have been decided within 5 percentage points. Like Lincoln's second election, Grant's couple of elections, those have been kind of blowouts. Monroe, because he was uncontested, have been kind of blowouts. But we've had a lot of elections in this episode so far that were decided by a percentage or less, right? Rutherford B. Hayes barely pulled it off. The fact that Garfield then wins after Rutherford B. Hayes for the Republicans is kind of shocking because of like how close it had been, and they just lost part of the South. And then Grover Cleveland comes in, and it's actually not a surprise, but even he like doesn't like blow it away.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of these elections are being decided within 1 percentage point.
That's crazy.
It's like we keep expanding the right to vote in America, and the elections remain super tight.
Yeah, really
because that's what our country's spirit is.
Yeah.
When Franklin Delano Roosevelt wins the election in 1932, there are things called Hoovervilles that exist in every major city.
Is this the like cookie cutter houses?
Nope. Those are going to come in the 60s and 70s. These are shanty towns of unemployed men, women, and children who have lost their homes, cannot pay rent, and have literally with like corrugated steel and like plywood essentially created small villages on the outskirts of town. The country overwhelmingly votes for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which gets me to the main character of the fifth party system.
Da, 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 da.
Red Rocks Amphitheater.
Nice! Hell yeah!
Yes. So FDR gets elected with what's called a New Deal coalition. And I wrote it down, so let me find it. How deep into my notes? Good. Okay, that's actually really soon. I'm like basically still where I thought I was.
Good God.
Okay, so Franklin Delano Roosevelt wins the presidency in 1932, wins re-election in 1936 with this massive New Deal coalition. And here's who it includes. Anybody in a union.
Oh, okay.
Black Americans, Catholics, Jewish people, big city machines. So like the Irish, for example.
Okay.
Intellectuals. So people with a college degree. Anyone with a minority status at all whatsoever.
Jesus. So.
But also like middle-class Americans who believe that the Republicans should be punished for their mishandling of the economy. Basically, the only people not voting for Democrats in 32 and 36 are wealthy, country club, Protestants. So Baptists, Lutherans, Episcopalians. If you are a wealthy Protestant in a country club, if you're a WASP, you're voting for the Republicans. Yeah. Everyone else is voting for Democrats.
Cool.
Correct.
Cool.
He proposes a bunch of shit, FDR does, as part of his New Deal. And this is what it is. He's like, I have a new deal for the average American. Here's the new deal I'm going to make for you when it comes to the economy. It's going to have all these different promises in it. We're going to completely reshape everything. And Americans are like, hell yes, clearly this isn't working. Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
Get your tits out. Get your public works project out. Get your Social Security out. Get your public education out. Yes, all sorts of things. Correct. All sorts of different things are going to come out of this project. We say Red Rocks Amphitheater is the main character of this episode. Why?
Girl, I don't know.
Yes, you do.
I'm sure it was part of a New Deal project or something. That's all. That's as far as I'm going to be able to tell you.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt got millions of dollars assigned to what's called the Work Progress Administration, which then just kind of built shit across this country.
Hell yeah.
And they were like, hey, you know that spot between two rocks near Denver where they hold concerts sometimes?
Let's make that into a concert.
Let's go ahead and build bathrooms and some stands there.
Yeah.
And then people were paid like money, working salary to build this. There are trails in America's national parks today that were originally dug by Work Progress Administration people.
Wow.
We were building post offices. We were painting murals. Because not only were we hiring like the average man who could do manual labor through the Work Progress Administration, we were also hiring artists to paint murals. We're hiring people to write poetry, to write plays.
Incredible.
We are funding as much of American society as we can.
Because this was in part to help us get out of the Great Depression.
Correct. We're like, if it's Keynesian economics at its most basic level, the more money we can put in the average individual salary, the more economic activity they will generate, and that will help the economy.
Wow, crazy how that works.
Right. Correct. I mean, we can argue the economic impact of the New Deal versus World War II, but but by and large, the idea is if you can put money in their accounts, they will spend it, and that will then generate more money. So we're funding artists. We're funding workers to build things. But then we're also creating Social Security. And here's something really funny about Social Security. Social Security was created to get you to retire. It's like, we will promise you money after you retire.
If you stop working, jobs to new people.
To give a younger person a job.
Damn.
Because we need more people hired. We need to lower this unemployment rate. So if we could get you out of the workforce, then someone looking for work can literally take your job. And now it's like this bedrock of American stability now. And so he's doing all of these things, and they're all so common sense to us that it's this universally accepted appreciated political institution. And like I said, it completely shreds the map of like what the political system's going to look like.
Right.
It unites everyone around this common vision. And then after FDR, you're going to see a fading of that good time and a completely new political alignment begin.
Right. Okay.
What did I write?
Jesus.
No, this is all good. I've covered.
The way I'm glued to my notes when I'm telling a story because I don't know what the fuck I'm going to say next sometimes. And Grant's like, oh shit, I wrote something.
Well, I'm just like, there's a couple
I
of
did
details.
about 10 to 12 hours of research. What did I find?
I like missed a couple things, rearranged my schedule. I'm not getting dinner with someone right now to make sure I could do this. So what did I write? Okay. The New Deal creates a bunch of really important stuff for us, right? It's defined in part because these immigrant communities, which don't have a necessarily a connection to a political institution, are willing to vote for him, right?
Okay.
So they vote for him in 32. They vote for him in 36. In 1940, America is very clearly about to go to war. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt runs for the presidency again. Unprecedented third term.
Right.
People vote for him. They're like, yes, okay. Third term as president. We enter in December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor happens. So he's president then. He runs for re-election again in 1944 for a fourth term in 1944. Unprecedented.
Yeah.
He wins. But here's something crazy. 1944, Franklin Delano Roosevelt has seen us through the Great Depression and basically all of World War II.
Yeah.
World War II will end in April, May, and June of 1945. Americans can kind of see the end of the tunnel. We're not worried about losing the war anymore. D-Day was successful 6 months ago. And still 45% of Americans vote against FDR. Imagine voting against the president that had done all of that stuff. And I'm not saying they were wrong. What I'm saying is America is inherently a two-party system.
Right, yeah.
FDR had pushed a bunch of stuff, and a lot of it had been good. He never managed to achieve universal health care, which was something that he had kind of thought about doing.
Okay.
In large part because, one, education was handled at the local level, and two, a universal healthcare program would mean in the South, white patients could be seen at the same time as black patients, and that wasn't acceptable.
God forbid.
Correct. And the South was heart of Democratic support, so that never happens.
Okay.
And then FDR dies. His vice president comes into power because that's what happens in America.
Right, because he died in office.
Yes.
Right.
Like Franklin Delano Roosevelt dies in 1945.
Right, yeah.
He dies only a handful of months after winning re-election. Right. And Truman inherits the presidency, tries to inherit the coalition. No one ever does it as well as the original.
Right. Okay.
And so you already start to see some initial fraying. So Truman's reelection in 1948 comes without the unified support of the North or the South, who in 1948, 3 years after World War II ends, are now both kind of experimenting with like different political identities.
Okay.
Truman wins because he's from Missouri with the support of the Midwest and the West and fragments of the New Deal coalition as well.
Right.
However, if you want to talk about the end of the fifth party system, it's really hard for us to define because it could end in 1952 or it could end in 1994 or any of the elections in between.
Who won those respective elections?
Yeah. So if Truman wins re-election in 1948,
48. Okay.
come 52, Dwight D. Eisenhower wins.
Right.
Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1952, I Like Ike, is the first Republican to win the presidency since Herbert Hoover in 1928.
Okay.
He wins it because he's a famous World War II general, right?
Okay, right.
He wins re-election in 56, and then 1960 rolls around, and John F. Kennedy wins re-election, wins the presidency.
Right.
He's a Democrat. He very, very narrowly beats Richard Nixon of California. Then Kennedy is killed.
Jesus.
Then pew pew to Kennedy.
Yeah.
LBJ becomes president in 1964.
His vice.
Correct. And is already pushing really popular legislation around Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, stuff like that. Massive landslide election for LBJ in 1964. So Democrats win again 2 years in a row.
Right.
And then the Vietnam War comes around and Americans, hey, LBJ, how many boys did you kill today? LBJ doesn't even run for re-election in 1968.
Right.
Nixon wins it in 68 and 72. And then Watergate, I'm a crook. He has to retire. Vice President Gerald Ford then becomes president.
Okay.
You still with me?
Yeah.
Ford then runs for his own term in 76. He loses to Carter, who's like, I'm super honest and not these fucking awful Republicans. And then Carter's like, I'm going to do it. And then he gets just like the worst hand dealt to him ever. Loses in 80. Reagan's elected. 84, he's reelected. 88, he can't run for a term, so his hand-picked successor, George H.W. Bush, wins.
Right.
And as history has proved to us, isn't going to do well. George H.W. Bush literally wins the first war against Iraq and still loses
his second.
to marijuana-smoking, jazz-playing, infidelity committing Bill Clinton in 92. And that's what, like,
crazy.
It's a crazy, like, kind of moment.
So we had like long stints of like certain parties winning over and over and over again until like essentially recent history.
Correct.
Correct?
Starting with the third party system, it's like Republicans, Democrats. Republicans, Democrats.
Yeah.
And then it's like Republican, like back and forth over and over and over again. So naming the end of this system, the fifth party system, is really hard.
Wait, I have one
level.
more question.
Go right ahead.
When did we sign the thing that said you can only have 2 terms as president?
Yeah, that's going to happen after FDR, sometime between Truman and Reagan, somewhere around there.
Okay, because LBJ would have technically been running for his 3rd term, right? Because JFK was assassinated so early on?
No, and that's really interesting.
Okay.
So JFK was assassinated after his midterms.
Oh,
and so technically, that's not a full term, so it doesn't count as a term.
Okay. That
so
was my question.
LBJ could have ran in 68 and been president for 10 years.
Okay, yeah.
Right. So for our listeners back at home,
yes,
the last election I really kind of left you at was the election of 1948 with Harry Truman. Right. He still, by and large, has the New Deal coalition.
Right.
And then it starts to shatter. Because Republicans in the South, white people in the South, are committed to the institution of discrimination.
Right.
Of keeping black people from voting.
Because it keeps them in power.
Correct. At this time, the South is functionally not a democracy because black people are not allowed to vote. Black people who try to register to vote are murdered.
Right.
White Democrats control everything. Like you should see, like, it's like there'd be 8 candidates in the primary, and the person who won the Democratic primary with like 32% of the vote would move on to the general election where they would win like 98% of the vote.
Oh my God.
And then like the second candidate would be like write-in candidates where you literally wrote a name on the ballot. It is functionally not a democracy.
And this is Democrats not as we know them today or as we know them today, kind of. Somewhere in between.
Yes, it's definitely somewhere in between.
Okay.
Not Democrats in the sense of like they're not standing up for voters' rights.
Right.
But sometimes the Democrats in the South are concerned about like poverty.
Okay.
Like I want to make sure the federal government can help lift these people out of poverty, which is really weird in what happens with the LBJ administration, because LBJ had originally been from Texas. So he was a white Southern Democrat who out of nowhere, quote, betrayed the South and passed civil rights legislation. But also outside of civil rights legislation, the thing that LBJ really worked on during his presidency was LBJ's war against poverty, because he came from very poor people in Central Texas outside of Austin. And that was something that resonated with white Democrats, because there was white poor people in the South that they wanted to take care of.
Racially conservative, fiscally potentially liberal.
Racist, fiscally liberal.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
An insane combination of political beliefs.
Yeah, that's libertarian today.
I just personally believe a government that has enfranchised a discriminatory view on the world should be held liable for the well-being of the white people in that system, was by and large like the entire political motivations of the South.
Then what are the Republicans believing?
Right. Well, so that's such a complicated question. Because
just not Democrats?
The fifth party system starts with FDR's election in 32. And it's a super clear mandate. Fix this economy. And then it becomes win World War II. And those are two
Okay.
very easy goals to work towards. Not because they're like easy to take care of, but because they're very clear. I know
Yeah.
what I got to fix.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
After World War II ends, kind of just right after FDR dies, well, what's the goal that we're working towards? So your question was Republicans in the North, what are they worried
Yeah.
about? Republicans in the North are different than Republicans elsewhere.
Okay.
Republicans in the North are worried about racial justice.
Okay.
Republicans in the Midwest are worried about fiscal policy.
Okay. So they're kind of united over different things that they disagree with the
Correct.
Democrats on.
LBJ manages to pass civil rights legislation in the 1960s, largely through like a compilation of like Republicans, Democrats, kind of, but like not Southern Democrats agree. Like there's a Democrat out of Idaho that votes for the civil rights legislation. There's a Republican out of Vermont that votes for civil rights legislation.
Okay.
Like it's not a map that we would really recognize today. But that's why the ending of this coalition is so difficult also for us to name. Because Democrats are going to start to consistently win the North and Republicans are going to start to consistently win the South
It's such a wild switch.
at the presidential level.
Okay. Okay.
Nixon will carry the South in
Right.
72.
Because we talked about this during your Nixon
Correct.
episode.
Democrats will win U.S. Senate seats in the South throughout the 70s. And they will switch over in the 80s.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make sense what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
to be mostly Republicans
Republicans at this point.
Yeah.
You see at the national presidential level, people completely detached from even the senatorial level as to what they're voting for.
Okay.
During the second half of this fifth party system, which is actually what makes it really, really difficult to classify.
So it's like today it's almost essentially if you're voting Republican across your ticket, unless
Correct.
you're like, I don't know, have a vendetta against someone.
For those of you back home,
Yeah.
maybe in countries with like a parliamentary system, we vote for a national leader and then we vote for our representatives to the national legislature.
Yeah.
And then we vote for our representatives
To our
the
state
level.
legislature.
And so have you heard of the term Reagan Democrat?
I think you've mentioned it, but
Okay.
explain it again.
A Reagan Democrat was like, Wisconsin is a great example. A Reagan Democrat voted for Ronald Reagan for president in 1980, who was a Republican.
Yeah.
And then a Democratic for the U.S. Senate, a Democratic for the U.S. House, a Democrat for the governor, and a Democratic for the state legislature.
Okay, so it's much more bipartisan.
Right. Well, it's like, well, who actually holds your political
Exactly,
belief
yeah.
there? Like,
Yeah.
what are you actually believing in?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of tough. There's so much ambiguity between these two political parties.
It feels like they don't know who they are. They're like a coming out queer person.
Yes.
That's like doesn't quite know what to say or do.
Right.
You know.
So you could argue, here's like your whole spectrum of where the fifth party system ends.
Right.
You could argue that the fifth party system ended in 1952 when Eisenhower was
Right.
elected.
Okay.
You could argue that the fifth party system ended in 1948 when Truman failed to sweep the North or the South and had to be carried by the Midwest and West.
Right. Okay.
Or you could go all the way to 1994
Yeah.
when Clinton wins re-election, but Republicans for the first time in like 60 years wins control of the House of Representatives.
Wow.
That's when Newt Gingrich becomes Speaker of the House. They call it the Republican Revolution. Or you could argue the fifth party system ended in 2014.
Okay.
And I'm going to get to that in a second.
Okay.
But this New Deal coalition, which phrased relatively quickly at the presidential level, sticks with us throughout for the U.S. state and Senate, for the House level. Here's a couple of states that still were experiencing New Deal coalitions. Maia, when do you think
Hearing my name is like a jump scare. in
Sorry.
These notes. That's okay.
the state of North Dakota
Right.
had a statewide U.S. senator
Okay.
who was a member of the Democratic Party
Jesus.
until what year?
2014.
2018.
Holy shit.
Same with Missouri, when Heidi Heitkamp and Claire McCaskill lost re-election in 2018.
If you're watching on the video, and this is a reminder to myself as I'm editing this in the future, I'm going to put in the electoral maps for the last couple elections, at least presidential elections, so you can see what these states actually look like for our friends overseas or who are not politically inclined, because I don't blame you.
South Dakota, Arkansas, and Louisiana all had Democratic representatives in the U.S. Senate until 2014.
Jesus.
And the states of West Virginia and Montana had Democratic representatives in the U.S. Senate until 2024.
Oh my God.
These people, these politicians, were oftentimes elected like in 2000 or 2004, maybe 2006 or 2008.
Yeah.
Or in the 90s at first. Like that's when they first took office. And then they kept running for re-election.
Right.
But when they first took office, unambiguously, it was a New Deal coalition of like strong labor support, indigenous people, working class voters who voted them into office. And it wasn't until very, very recently that they lost those votes. Like, here's something that's going to be crazy for you. I talk about my home state, Nebraska, all the time. I talk about how conservative it is. Nebraska Democratic Senator, U.S. Senator Ben Nelson voted for Obamacare. In fact, Obamacare received 60 votes in the Senate, and that included votes from senators in North Dakota, Arkansas, Montana, Nebraska, and Missouri, and Indiana. They carried states that are ruby red today because they had senators that had been, by and large, collected from people who were part of the New Deal coalition.
Wow.
However, we view the end of the New Deal coalition as somewhere around 1994. When Democrats finally lose control of the U.S. House of Representatives.
And sorry, what year?
1994.
Okay, 4.
Which is Bill Clinton's first midterm.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton then wins re-election in 96. He's super popular because of how cool he is. And it's around this like 94 to 96 era that most people agree that the sixth political party system has started.
For sure started.
And that's the system that we are in today.
Okay.
And I'm now going to really turn over to the notes because I was specific with the wording.
Fair enough.
Oh, before I tell us the main character of the sixth party system.
Okay.
Who was the main character of the fifth party system? It was Red Rocks.
Yes.
And why was that the main character?
Because it was part of the New Deal.
Very good.
Yeah.
Main character for the sixth party system. Us.
I'm going to cry in a bad way.
While it's hard to put a specific date on the end of the fifth party system that was dominated by the New Deal coalition, the latest date, not like the newest, but like the last date of death
I see. Okay.
is 1994.
Because that's when like a lot of the New Deal coalition representatives are now no longer.
Specifically from the South.
Okay.
That's when Southern Democrats in the House of Representatives were wiped out and replaced by Republicans.
Okay.
Kind of en masse. 1994. Okay. I'm alive in 1994. Barely, but I'm alive. I know.
And this is George H.W. Bush losing his second.
No. 1994 is Bill Clinton's first midterm.
Right.
Yeah.
When is
pre-internet.
When is he elected?
Clinton's elected for the first time in 92.
Okay.
Re-elected in 96.
For our non-U.S. Listeners, we have presidential elections every 4 years, and then we have other election cycles every 2 years. So hence the difference between midterms, why they call them midterms, happens on the every 2 years.
Very good.
Yeah.
So if we consider the date of death, 1994, then 96 is the first political election under the sixth party system.
Okay.
To date, there have been 8 presidential elections under the system. 96, 2000, 04, 08, 96, 2000, 04, 08, 2012, 16, 20, 24.
Yeah.
Of the 8 presidential elections that have happened in the sixth party system, Democrats have won the national vote in 6 of the 8.
Right.
The parties have evenly split 4-4, the actual winner of the election, because of the Electoral College.
Because Hillary won the popular vote.
Hillary won the popular vote in 2016.
Right.
Al Gore won the popular vote in 2000.
Right.
Republicans, because of the Electoral College, took the actual office. And so that's the weird system we're in today. And it's really hard to define like whether or not it started or finished with us. It's also like Obama won a huge electoral victory in 2008. But part of that electoral victory has whispers of both the New Deal coalition and the Progressive coalition.
Okay.
So, like in 2008, for example, Obama won several rural counties in southwest Wisconsin. And elsewhere in places like Iowa and Minnesota, even Nebraska, even if he didn't win a majority of the vote, he was winning about 40% of
shocking,
the vote.
yeah.
Yes. Today, Democrats win between 18 and 22% of the vote. So it's a huge drop off in votes since then.
Yeah.
But there's a question of like, was that just the last fumes of the Progressive era and the New Deal era, like still showing themselves? Or was it literally just Donald Trump?
I think it's social media.
I don't know what the answer is, but it's really hard to figure out what
that difference. Yeah.
And this leads us now to the final section that I have just labeled as the future, because we're in the sixth political system right now, probably. And I'm now going to actually read word for word.
Okay, cool.
Crazy. It is hard to say if the sixth party system will continue to persist or if change continues to be afoot. If the entire period of American political history is some great transition from one clear political coalition to the next, or not. Saying that is hard for two reasons. First, the whisper of the New Deal coalition lasted well into the second decade of the century with the election of President Obama in 2012. And the elections that came after that have been dominated, to our unfortunate reality, by one man, Donald Trump. A man who cannot run for the presidency again and will one day die. And since he's the oldest person we have ever elected president, sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as in like, I'm hoping, I mean. But like Carter lost when he's in like his 40s and 50s.
Yeah, this man's in his, 70s, 80s?
Trump's solidly in his 80s.
Yeah, that's...
We are at the height and the sunsetting of Trump's political power.
Right.
Predicting the future is hard. Will some great economic crisis reorient our relationship with the government like it did in 1932? What coalitions will arrive after Trump leaves office? Do union voters and non-white voters who voted for Republicans at higher levels than in previous elections in 2024, do they end up changing the politics of the Republican Party? Or do their causes and issues just full on drop from our political discourse? Like in 10 years, are we just not worried about union rights or not? Because union voters now vote mainly for Republicans who don't give a shit about organized labor, and Democrats have no reason to spend political capital on them because they won't vote for them.
Yeah.
Hold your vote hostage. Do these voters return to the political party of the Democrats?
Right.
Or some fourth mysterious option emerge? And maybe even more importantly than questions about economic developments or the voting patterns of certain groups of people, how might climate change impact our elections of the 21st century? Some of the most conservative states in our democracy are in the South, which are most risk for climate change. The entire state of Florida gets engulfed by rising sea levels under some projections. Increasingly common wet bulb temperatures are happening in the South, which is when it's so hot and humid outside that the human body cannot function without the support of AC.
Yeah.
What's going to happen as those become more common? And I got both that data and that question from Garden and Gun magazine.
Sorry? The fuck?
Girl, it's linked. If you want Garden and Gun to explain wet bulb temperatures for you, I did the work.
Oh my God.
And in places like Nevada and Arizona, temperatures in the summer already get hot enough to melt trash cans and make cars inoperable.
And cook eggs on sidewalks.
And are driving droughts to be even more severe. If those states lose population to migration as they immigrate elsewhere and add electoral votes to those states, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Or worse, What happens if a severe climate crisis results in hundreds, potentially thousands of deaths right before a census takes and they lose congressional seats?
Right.
Or worse of all, potentially even more so, what happens if a giant climate crisis happens? The people that live in these states can't sell their homes, but can't continue to live there, and thus become internally displaced refugees and have to move to states without the economic capital to buy homes and are instead refugees. How does that impact the politics of the states that accept them? And how does that impact the politics of the states that don't?
Right.
I could see Washington welcoming people from California. I struggle to see Washington welcoming people from Florida. As our politics become increasingly regionalized, like it did in the run-up to the Civil War. Okay. As our politics become increasingly regionalized, as it did in the run-up to the Civil War.
Right.
As one naval captain said in the 1850s, it's unsettling. We all serve in the U.S. Navy, but I serve with Mississippians and Alabamans and New Yorkers and Pennsylvanians. I don't think Colorado will be eager to open the doors to Mississippi.
No.
And even if we are asked to accept them, I don't know if our progressive liberal political identity is overwhelmingly welcoming to these people as they settle and create a new life. I like to think better angels prevail, but I don't know how that whole system works out.
Yeah.
American politics has been defined by migration, both from other countries and within. And this is something that we've experienced before. I've mentioned on a previous podcast that the Great Migration of African Americans out of the South and into the industrial North is why Cleveland, Detroit, and Chicago are Democratic strongholds today.
Right.
It's not even unheard of historically within the last 100 years, within the last 80 years, for massive groups of Americans to leave the South to settle elsewhere. Everything in American politics can feel permanent until it very suddenly isn't.
Right.
John McCain was the Republican nominee for president in 2008.
Ugh, what a
12 years later, his home state, Arizona, voted for the Democrats.
Right.
Today, John McCain's seat and the other U.S. Senate seat are held by Democrats. Obama secured the largest electoral victory of the 21st century in 2008. His presidency ended and immediately saw a transition to Trump.
Right.
Ultimately, these trends move too slowly for us to notice right away, but have a dam breaking moment where it's like suddenly it's super obvious. And how did we not see it coming? Where everything that used to be, well, simply no longer is. So if I can leave you with some final notes, here's what I want you to take away from today's episode. We have always been a divided country. We are naturally resorting under our system to a two-party political system that, while frustrates progress for the issues we care about, checks reaches for authoritarian power.
Right.
These divided elections that have happened over and over again are the political norm. And giant landslide victories happen occasionally and almost always happen at the end of a certain party system.
Right.
As a massive transformation occurs.
Right.
The system always resets itself.
Interesting.
Because nothing is permanent.
I find it interesting that the new political party system is usually defined by the winners, in that it seems like the losers fade off into obscurity a little bit and the winners divide into categories that are so similar yet so different. Yeah, no, that's crazy.
Well, the winners divide specifically along the lines of the issue that they have not handled before.
Agreed on, yeah.
And it's hard in the current moment to see what that line will be. Is it climate change? Is it gun violence? Is it abortion? Is it something else? Is it income inequality? Right?
Yeah.
Like the great labor movement gains of the 1910s and 1890s of the Gilded Age were squashed in the 1920s by Republican control and then rebirthed in the 1930s by FDR and then crushed when communism and socialism was trying to come around in the 1940s. And so all of it is cyclical. There's a world out there where Colorado and Mississippi vote the same way, where California and Texas share a same political ideology.
Right.
All of it feels so set in stone until it's not. What I will say is this. If there's anything true about American electoral politics, is it's that the North and the South are going to vote differently. But even that is only because those populations in the South have not transformed. And we're seeing that change. Northerners are moving to the South. Non-white voters vote differently. But also, the South is becoming increasingly urbanized in places like Birmingham, Atlanta, Memphis, Nashville, the area around Washington, D.C., Charlotte, Charleston. Does the South remain conservative as it becomes more urban? It's a question that, for instance, and this will be the last thing I really kind of talk about, Nebraska's experiencing.
Right.
So Nebraska is a famously conservative state, a famously Republican state, and is increasingly an urban state as a majority of the population moves to Lincoln and Omaha.
Right.
It's already impacting the power in the state legislature, where Democrats hold a greater percentage of power in the Nebraska legislature than they do in Ohio.
Well, damn, Jackie. I can't control the weather.
Like, for instance, Democrats controlled both West Virginia Senate seats for 60 years.
Right. That divide between West Virginia and Virginia continues to baffle me.
Correct.
I feel like we've talked about it several times, but.
One last final statistic. I had to read the Wikipedia page today for the 2024 presidential election. And that was tough. I'm not going to lie about it. That was tough. Every single state in this country, except one, saw at least 30% of its population vote for the other party. So like in Idaho, for example,
right,
30% of people who cast a vote in Idaho voted for Kamala Harris. And I think it's so easy for us to perceive states as monoliths, and they're just not. Only one state voted so overwhelmingly for one candidate that fewer than 30% of its citizens voted for the other party.
Yeah.
The state was West Virginia. The state saw 28% of its voters vote for the Democrats, the only one that dipped below 30%. And interestingly, West Virginia was one of only 3 states to vote for Jimmy Carter in his 1980 re-election campaign that he lost.
Wow.
And so everything feels permanent until it's obviously
because Carter
not.
was Democrat.
Correct.
That's...
He won Georgia. He won West Virginia. He was from Georgia.
Yeah.
He won Georgia. He won West Virginia. He won Washington, D.C. And he won Minnesota.
Jesus Christ.
I know. Everything feels so permanent and forever.
Until it's not. And
so while we watch the news and we stand up in the face of the things that don't align with our values and we worry about the slippage of tyranny and things like that, we need to be comforted that this political reality is our current reality, not the forever reality, and that America's very, very strong political identities are actually going to be one of the things that help us weather the storm.
That's fair. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How do you feel about ranked choice voting?
Ooh.
Dear listener, right now we have a system where we just vote for one of two. And then if your candidate loses, and that's shit. Ranked choice voting is a system some people have proposed where you literally rank all of the candidates on the ballot so that if, say, you vote for like a third party candidate as your number one, but the third party candidate is clearly losing that election when you consider the whole scope of things, your vote will then be dropped, and then your vote will go to the person you've ranked as number 2 and then it'll keep going until you get to the final 2 candidates. And that's how you get your final winner.
So that's a great question for a lot of reasons. 1 second.
Yeah.
ASMR.
Oh, that was nice.
Right.
Yeah.
A non-alcoholic seltzer, so I can start to sober up.
Spindrift.
I'm doing that thing where the older I get, the less I'm certain of, because the more I'm curious about.
I had to explain Mouse on an Airplane to my coworker today.
Okay, go ahead.
And it was just really reaffirming.
Yes.
I was like, Mouse on an Airplane is me. But yeah.
And one thing that I'm curious about is, and stay with me on this, should we be having people vote for House of Representatives
that
can't explain, even with some hints, it's like roll? or
Okay.
like its responsibilities, right?
Right.
Like when I'm hungry for dinner, I'm not going to call up my neighbor and ask them to decide for me because they don't know what my budget is. They don't know what
Right.
my preference is. They don't know if I'm like leaving in 3 days. If
And
I
you
have food or
personally
whatever.
just met them like last month.
Right, so literally so
Yeah.
true. They have not been paying attention.
Yeah.
And so when you ask me what my thoughts are on ranked choice voting, I think 2-3 years ago, I was like an unambiguous hell yes.
Yeah.
And right now I'm like, I think it's interesting. I think it makes the ballot more complicated. And I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily sure. I think it's also like rife to like political gamesmanship. There is something kind of clean about this person got more votes than anyone else, so this person makes the calls. Right?
Yeah.
I also think people like ranked choice voting because it makes it more viable to be a third party.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't necessarily know if I care enough about that.
Because everything I've learned tonight has shown me that regardless of how many parties there are, we're gonna revert to 2 regardless.
And Canada and the UK, our 2 closest countries,
Yeah.
politically speaking, in terms of like political systems, kind of show that.
Yeah.
They both have technically third parties.
Right.
Both of those in both countries, third parties are more or less nominal.
Would you say that there's like in the like phases of change between the phases of our political party system that there is a third party that comes up and rises up and kind of like the third or the one of the 2 main parties fades off?
Yeah, I think what we are currently seeing from both political parties is like unsustainable coalitions because
Yeah.
the coalitions that exist in them largely exist to support Trump or to oppose Trump.
Right.
Right. Like I actually really struggle to see how union members continue to support a political party that wants to make it harder to unionize. However,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be the first time, for instance, that like people voted against what we perceive as their own economic best interest.
Right.
And so I think America is at the cusp of a 7th political party like system as things continue to figure themselves out a little bit. And I think you need to look at some local results to understand that a little bit better. Like I think Arizona and Georgia are long-term drifting towards us.
Right.
Us being Democrats.
They're
I think we got
still
to
swing states though,
right.
yeah.
I think we got to keep an eye on places like Nevada, maybe New Jersey and Virginia for things going in the
Right.
opposite direction.
And what, in 2008 we were a swing state?
Colorado was, yeah,
which is
absolutely.
crazy.
So I think we're in the heart of resettling some things, but I'm saying that with an asterisk because 2028 will be the first election since 2012 in which Donald Trump has not been on the ballot. That's a generational change of Americans.
Oh my God.
And I think anyone who claims to know what that electorate feels about 2 candidates from these 2 parties,
It's going to be
foolish.
so different.
it's something that I'm kind of excited about.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
something that everyone in the world should be nervous about. But I'm also excited
to
about.
see what how invested I am in politics once it's not this man's a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
I did see something on Instagram that was like, next time you're talking to like a diehard Trump fan, tell him that he's only ever won elections against a woman.
Right. As soon as a man runs against him,
Yeah.
he loses. And like, how does that impact the Democratic nominating process in 2028?
True.
Right. How does that impact the Republican nominating process in 2028? We've also seen like people who've attempted to beat Trump not necessarily work out, but also Trump has stuck around for so long that he has reshaped people's views
Yeah.
on the political parties.
He's changed the Republican Party, I think, as a whole.
Yes. To the point where it's like, it's very hard for me right now to define what they stand for. Right now, they are working
Yeah.
to cut spending on things. I don't know how that works out long term. I actively don't know. I don't
But
think
don't forget
anyone's
to
going
tune in to the military parade he's doing on Flag Day. But I mean, it's like also Trump's birthday, but like, don't say that too loud.
Right. And that's like, there's Republicans out there who want to vote for Republicans who really don't like that. There's
Right.
Democrats who actively vote for Democrats who think that's cool as shit. Like 2028 is going to be so interesting in this context. I think you're going to see swing states fall off the map. I think you're going to see
Yeah.
swing states
Come on.
reemerge
Yeah.
onto the map, right? I think Minnesota's a really interesting place to keep an eye on. I think Tennessee is an interesting place to keep an eye on. I think North and South Carolina are interesting places to like watch. I think New Mexico is an interesting place to watch. They don't know what's going to happen there. I just am saying, like, I know enough both in general and also from putting together the story to say, like, it's foolish for us to think that we're going to see the 2016 election, which was really just kind of a version of the 2012 election, be repeated in 2028.
I can't wait in like 40 years or something when we're retired, hopefully, that...
Definitely, but that's
well,
fine.
I mean, like, Jesus Christ.
No, I have a pension. I don't know what you're going to do, but I have a pension.
The lavish lifestyles we live, Grant, are you kidding me? Your pension's not going to be enough.
I keep getting degrees.
Well, off the top of my head, you could take this Narcanol, dust it lightly on a wine glass. It's going to be so interesting to see the effect social media has had on all
foreign
of this.
actors, AI, deep fakes. There's so much to be unsure about. If we were to go to the history books of today's lesson, Grover Cleveland.
Jesus Christ.
Grover Cleveland was the last presidential candidate to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, something Donald Trump is currently doing now.
Right.
Grover Cleveland represented a sea change in political viewpoints in America, but did not represent a sea change in actually who won. Republicans won before, and Republicans won after.
Right.
There is historical precedent to suggest that that's what Donald Trump's going to see happen. That once that specific man's gone, traditional Democratic voters are going to find traditional Republicans gross and off-putting and vote for other people. There's also a chance that that's not true.
Yeah.
That what he's done, he's changed their perception of them and now view Democrats as like elitist, out of touch, gross and off-putting. Chuck Schumer exists. So it's, I don't know, you know?
Chuck Schumer, Jesus Christ.
So hopefully this makes you feel better. And if anything from this episode, this is truly the last thing I have to say.
Yeah.
I hope you now feel more informed the next time you get into an argument at a party. I hope
That's literally all Grant lives for. It's what I do. It's what I live for. Poor unfortunate souls.
I love getting in a political argument, clearly winning, pull someone else in, let them take the reins of what I've set up. That's what I did this last weekend at the wedding where we were teaming about this person.
I want to hear about that.
Right, off camera, definitely.
Yeah. Well, this has happened with you and me before, so.
But it's like, oh, okay, everyone's kind of agreeing with me. Interesting. You go ahead and say more.
What do you have to say?
I'm going to go get more whiskey.
Yeah.
Kind of situation.
Always whiskey. In my case, it was Fireball.
It always is. So yeah, I know we have a Patreon episode to record, but it's a lot of fun.
I have a better understanding of when certain presidents came to be.
I said the names of most of them, almost all of them.
And I'm sure I could say some of them.
Roughly in the correct order, I would gently remind you we've had 44 different people serve as president. We're on our 46th president, but Grover Cleveland and Donald Trump are both repeat presidents.
Yeah, okay.
I did that math almost instantly.
I'm proud of you.
You should be impressed by me.
I don't do any kind of math in my head, bitch. If I have a calculator, you can bet your ass I'm using it. I don't know how to do any simple math.
And so, I said a lot of names tonight. I think I mostly got the order right. Maybe I didn't. We'll find out.
Sorry, early on.
Yes.
Burr was president at some point.
Nope.
No, he wasn't. Okay. And that's why he killed
after
Hamilton.
he killed
okay.
No.
Oh.
It's not why. It's because Burr killed Hamilton, and in doing so, killed 2 things.
His
America's most promising politician and Burr's own political career. Yeah. What are the questions you got? I'm feeling so good and informed right now.
Sure, I'll have summits. Like in the middle of the night, you're just going to get a text that's
I'm going
like,
to be driving to nationals and be like, I don't have time for this.
You're going to be on a bus. Shut up.
What about Martin Baron? Like, what about Martin?
I still couldn't say the presidents in order and definitely would still get some of the I states mixed up. So overall, collectively learned nothing in terms of those simple tests that you can take online. In general, my own understanding of our America's political structure, learned a lot.
So if you'd like to find us on Instagram, if you'd like to find us on social media, we're Will I Laughed Podcast. No, just Will I Laughed, sorry.
Yeah.
If you want to find additional content of the two of us, you can find us on Patreon, where we are Well I Laughed podcast. This is episode 1 of Famous Feuds.
Yes.
I almost said Family Feud, and I'm like, that's not right at all. I'm not Steve Harvey. If you have a story of a famous feud you have had, please share it with us at wellilaughdpod@gmail.com, or you can submit us on our website, where we are wellilaughed.com.
Submit us.
I'm a little whiskey drunk. I'm not going to lie. I've done Patreon. I've done social media. I've done the website. Finally, please invite us to your wedding. But also, you can request us on Patreon if that feels a little too weird.
Cameo.
Do you want to do it? Oh, I didn't think I was this drunk. My brain no longer has to...
Your brain was just running full steam ahead, and now that it doesn't need to consume the whiskey to get you to the next bullet point,
I don't have
your
to
brain
hold it all together.
Just like, shit, what?
There's a lot of moments in the hymn to Dionysus that I'm currently thinking about right now. That's not helping anything.
No,
either.
it's not.
I'm holding
We're
it all
on
together.
Cameo.
Yeah, we are.
If you would like to request us for your Flag Day celebrations, your roasts, your bat mitzvahs, your christenings, although I wouldn't really recommend us for that, your election parties for next year, you got to be prepared. And also rate us, review us, send us your reviews so I can post them on my website, because that's now something I might be doing.
Funny comments and notes of appreciation.
Yeah. If you want Grant to read them, send them to our Instagram. If you want me to read them, you send them to our TikTok or our YouTube. That's usually how it goes.
Get me off air. I'm about to say some crazy shit right now.
Okay, goodbye. Love you.
Bye.